Chapter 576. The lights in the alley lit up again. The bodies of several ninjas in black were lying in a pool of blood. Their eyes were still wide open as if they had seen something incredible. Whoosh! 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 More than a dozen black shadows flitted across the roof of the modern building. Using the floors of the building as stepping stones, they nimbly jumped and landed next to the bodies of the ninjas in black. They were also wearing black clothes and strange ninja masks. They came here to check and deal with the bodies on the ground. We were only half a minute late. They were all killed in one hit. Not even one round. One of the ninjas swallowed his saliva and said in a low voice. A tall figure walked out of the darkness. The group of ninjas in black made way for him. Under the dim light of the street lamp, they could see that he was wearing a Wuxia mask and carrying two katanas on his back. Captain Wuxia. The ninjas respectfully said to the Wuxia masked man. The Wuxia captain glanced at the bodies on the ground and said in a hoarse voice, "If we had arrived half a minute earlier, maybe they would not have been the only ones to die. Even we would have been dead." After the first ninja team was destroyed, their figures disappeared without a trace around here. A ninja said. The Wuxia captain smiled and said, "They probably think that we don't have the information they want, so there is no point in killing us. Go and check the name Logan. Those two seem to be here for him. Then report what happened tonight to the higher-ups. Tell them that if the organization is not prepared to die, then they can't even test the strength of that man." Yes. The ninjas nodded. "If you don't want to die, be careful. All of you, pay attention. The target this time is different from those cats and dogs that you usually deal with. He is a real living legend." Captain Wuxia's eyes flashed with a cold light as he spoke. All the ninjas nodded in agreement. Captain Wuxia was one of the most famous ninja assassins in Japan. If even he was so afraid of him, one could imagine how terrifying the other party was. They didn't notice it. Right above these people, nearly 3,000 meters in the air, Kale and Yutong faced the wind and hovered in the air, overlooking their every move. Yutong carried Murasame on her back, her eyes showed silver light, and her black hair fluttered wildly. She was really like a holy goddess. She said softly, "Those ninjas just now were all death warriors. They were all brainwashed. Their memories are fragmented. The ones below are probably the same. They came from Nissan's mysterious organization. These organizations only pass down missions to their subordinates through various secret methods. Sometimes, even the inner core members don't know who the upper echelons are. They don't even know where the headquarters is. As long as you want to, you can track it down, right?" Kale smiled. "Of course." Yutong had a calm expression on her face. These seemingly brilliant organizational tactics had already been used by her 50 years ago. Moreover, in front of Yutong's extraordinary telepathic ability, as long as there was a target, no matter how they hid, they couldn't escape her eyes. Kale shrugged and said, "Okay, then I'll leave it to you. Find out the source of this organization and see if there is any information about Logan's whereabouts. Destroy this organization while you're at it." "No problem." Yutong nodded, looked at Kale, and asked in surprise, "Boss, what about you?" "I'm going to a place. 70 years ago, I always wanted to go, but the war ended too early, and I didn't have time." Kale smiled indifferently and glanced at the night sky. Yutong showed a thoughtful look. It seemed that tonight would be another sleepless night. New East City, Emperor of Heaven Pavilion. Although since the end of World War II 70 years ago, the Emperor of Heaven's right to manage the country was transferred to the Prime Minister, but the Emperor was still a symbolic head of state. In Nissan, he had a status that was second only to one person. After all, the Emperor of Heaven had been deified in Nissan for many generations, and he had become a god of faith. Now, even if the new Prime Minister took office, he still had to go through the Emperor of Heaven's authority. Now, Tokyo was full of wind and rain, and undercurrents were surging. As the residence of the Emperor of Heaven and his family, the Emperor of Heaven's pavilion had already placed armed soldiers and ninja death attendants inside and outside, forbidding anyone from entering or leaving. At this time, the Emperor of Heaven's pavilion was still decorated in the old-era style, and a room on the third floor was faintly lit. A beautiful woman wearing a military uniform came to the door and knocked on the wooden door. An old voice came from inside, "Is it Kazuko? Come in." Kazuko pushed the door open and saw a white-haired old man standing in front of the portrait of the Emperor of Heaven during World War II. She softly called out, "Grandpa." N. The old man responded, and his eyes didn't leave the portrait. After a long time, he sighed with emotion, "It's been 70 years. I remember I was only 12 years old at that time. After the defeat and surrender, my father committed suicide. I inherited the emperor's position at a young age, so I lost the head of state's authority. Your father didn't live up to expectations. After a few years, he passed away due to illness, and I was forced to take the throne. Fortunately, your uncle had a plan. It wasn't easy to get the head of state position back to our clan." The old man clenched his fists, and his old voice was filled with resentment. "This was all caused by that man. I didn't expect him to come here. Grandpa, please believe me," Kazuko said with a heroic spirit, "I will definitely get rid of that demon and avenge the ancestors. Then I'll leave it to you. I'm not worried about you at all, but fortunately." The old man sighed helplessly. Kazuko fell silent and pondered, "My sister, it's indeed not suitable for her to stay in Tokyo, but her weak body is also not suitable for her to move to other places. Don't worry, I've already sent Nissan's third sword master to protect her safety." The old man asked, "The third sword master is Sword 1, right?" Kazuko replied, "Yes, because he only has one sword move. Otherwise, I think he can be ranked second." "Good, then I'm relieved." The old man continued to look at the emperor's portrait in silence. At the back of the emperor pavilion, there was a quiet and elegant Japanese-style courtyard. There were cherry trees and fountains here, all in the style of the old imperial family. A young girl in a long kimono leaned against the wooden door and knelt on the floor of the corridor. There was a touch of paleness on her beautiful face that couldn't be removed, but because of this, she looked even more pitiful. Her long black hair was draped over her shoulders, and together with her kimono, it was laid on the floor like a cherry blossom that no one appreciated at night. The girl in the kimono looked at the moonlit courtyard with melancholy. She didn't move, and her eyes were dead. Until the sound of heavy footsteps came from the corridor, then a faint light appeared in her eyes. Usually, no one would come over at this time. Even if someone came, they would try to be as careful as possible and not make such presumptuous noise. Under the surprised gaze of the girl in the kimono, a tall blonde young man wearing muddy boots casually walked through the corridor in front of her. "It's so quiet, I thought no one lived here." Kale suddenly stopped and looked down at the girl in the kimono sitting on the floor. "Who are you? Why, cough cough, are you here?" The girl in the kimono covered her mouth and coughed a few times. She opened her cute eyes and asked curiously. "I just walked in like this," Kale said straightforwardly. "Those people outside, didn't they stop you?" The girl in the kimono was stunned like a kitten. This was her house, and in the past 10 years, there were no more than 10 people who could come here, including her grandfather and sister. Kale smiled. "Stop me? There are still people in this world who can stop me, but not on Earth." Chapter 577. The autumn wind blew across the heavenly Emperor Pavilion. The cherry blossoms in the courtyard drifted down and landed in the small pond beside the fake mountain, creating ripples in the water. "Then you must be very powerful." The girl in kimono widened her eyes and stared at the tall and muscular Kale. "Kind of." Kale smiled faintly. He didn't know if the girl in front of him was too cute or she was really stupid. She didn't have any hostility toward him, a foreigner. Instead, she was curious and happy. "What's your name?" the girl in kimono asked again. "Shouldn't you tell me your name before asking for someone else's name?" Kale immediately asked. "Oh right." The girl in kimono tilted her head and said softly, "My name is Sakura Ji. Sakura as in cherry blossoms and Ji as in Jishin. But my family calls me Yukiko. It means that they want me to be happy forever, although I don't know what happiness is. My name is Kale. Kai as in Kaido. Kal as in Erkong." Kyle followed the other party's style and played a joke on the name from his previous life. He kept looking at the girl's pale face. After hearing his name, Sakura smiled from the bottom of her heart and commented, "Kale, not a bad name." Kale didn't know what to say. The girl in kimono in front of him didn't seem to be afraid of his name, which was taboo in Nissan. Tap, 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 at this moment. The sound of wooden clogs hitting the ground came from the corridor. Kale looked to the side and saw a black shadow pass in front of him. In the next moment, a young Japanese swordsman clad in a samurai suit had already arrived in front of him. Then, he leapt high into the air with his sword held high above his head. It seemed as if he was ready to strike at any moment. Before he even landed, the sword was already swinging down. Under Sakura's gaze, she only saw a flash of light. It was so fast. A glint of surprise flashed across Kale's eyes. If it were a normal person, they would have been cut in half by the time they realized it. But it was a pity that it was him. After many card draws and evolution, especially the transformation of the Protoss cards, Kale's body was already very different from a human's. Kale didn't dodge. He stretched out his left index finger like lightning and raised it up like a sword to block the attack. Clang! The Nisong swordsman's sword slashed at the finger, making a crisp sound like metal clashing. A strand of shocking blood slid down from the finger and dripped on the back of Sakuraji's white hand on the side. Kale was really surprised this time. He was actually injured. Although he didn't use the power of the 2 stars, the power of the fire god, or even the protection of venom and Weiss, the fact that a human could hurt him, who was now a god, could only be described with 2 words. Top. This was a sword strike that had reached the pinnacle of perfection. It could even touch a being as powerful as a god. Compared to Kale's surprise, Kenichi was more shocked and desperate at this time. In this new era where modern technology was developed and martial arts and kendo were declining, Kenichi didn't have any moves or routines. For 30 years, he had only relied on this sword to defeat modern kendo masters and martial arts grandmasters. He was almost invincible in Nissan. Kenichi had slashed modern tanks and guns. But now, facing the enemy in front of him, Nissan, this sword, which was infused with all his faith, only made a very small wound. This was the strongest in the world. Kenichi put away his sword and half knelt in front of Kale. Kale looked at him in surprise. "You're not going to continue?" Kenichi smiled bitterly. How could he continue? He was born with only 1 sword. Now, it only made a small wound. Even if Kale stood there and let him slash, 100 or 1,000 times, it wouldn't be able to endanger his life. Kenichi took a deep breath and smiled bitterly. As expected of the American Emperor, Kale. "I really can't compare to the old kendo seniors. No matter how hard I try to catch up, it's futile. In my opinion, no one in Japan during World War II could compare to you with that sword strike of yours." Kale was expressionless. He was telling the truth. At that time, he was only a super soldier. The difference between him and now that he was a god was like heaven and earth. Kenichi can die without regrets after receiving your affirmation. Kenichi smiled in relief. He knelt on the ground and nailed the sword in his hand to the floor of the corridor. He said to Kale, "Come, to die in your hands, I didn't train my body and pursue kendo for 30 years in vain. Then I'll send you on your way. Kale bent his finger and flicked it. A wisp of golden flame shot out from his finger. After the flame fell on Kenichi, his clothes and flesh melted and annihilated in an instant until the whole body turned into flying ash. The night wind blew, and the flying ash drifted out of the yard. Only the long sword nailed to the ground was left. Kyle lowered his head and saw that the skin on his finger was still dripping with blood. It was obvious that the wound had not healed yet. Another sword mixed with sodium carbon steel? Kale looked at the sword nailed to the floor in surprise. Only sodium carbon steel could suppress the self-healing ability, just like Murasame. The sword used by Kenichi was probably also called the Demon Sword in Nissan. You're injured. Inji looked at Kale and suddenly stretched out her left hand. A white warm light glowed from her palm and fell on Kale's injured finger. The wound caused by sodium carbon steel quickly healed. Healing ability? Kale raised his eyebrows and looked at Inji. He reminded her coldly, "You're helping your enemy." Enemy? Inji looked blank and whispered back, "I only know the difference between a healthy person and a sick person." Then you're not afraid of me. It was the first time that Kale met such a strange girl. She seemed to be imprisoned in the Emperor Pavilion, but she was protected by a powerful swordsman. Do you want to kill me? Inji showed a pure and flawless smile and leaned against the wooden door. She weakly explained, "The doctor said that I only have half a year left. I only have half a year left to live. Healing can save others, but it can't save myself. I'm not even afraid of death. Why should I be afraid of you?" I see. Kale squatted down and stared at Inji, who was kneeling on the ground. The corner of his mouth quietly outlined a smile. "Girl, do you want to live? I can give you a lifespan of 50 years, 100 years, or even 1,000 years." At this moment, Kale was like a demon from hell, whispering something that humans could only dream of. But Inji gently shook her head and said decisively, "I don't want it." Why? Kale was stunned. Inji smiled and said, "Even if I can continue to live, I'll be living here forever. It's boring and wasting time. It's better to die early." Kale suddenly understood that the girl in front of him had no meaning in life. She could continue to live, but she could also die at any time. Therefore, there was no fear in her eyes, no enemy, only how to waste the last period of her life. Interesting. Then I'll teach you the beauty of living. Kale said. His left hand moved forward and hugged Inji's slender and soft waist. His right hand moved forward and held the back of her head. Beauty? Sakuragi blinked her eyes in confusion, but in the next moment, her words, along with her cherry-like lips, were forcefully blocked by Kyle. Chapter 578. Germany, outside a border forest. It had snowed heavily the night before, accumulating more than 30 centimeters of snow. The mountains and forests were all covered in snow, and the air was cold. Captain America Steve, Black Widow Natasha, Hawkeye Clinton, Hulk, Banner, and Falcon Sam. Almost all the members of the Avengers were gathered here. They were fully armed, and there was also a group of SHELD agents with them. It was obvious that a big battle was about to break out. Steve sat on a motorcycle with a round shield on his back and looked at the quiet snow forest. The others held their breaths and didn't make any sound, as if they were waiting for something. Whoosh, a faint stream of light streaked across the sky, and a golden-red Iron Man fell from the sky and landed on the snowy ground beside the team. With a clang, his left knee and right fist touched the ground at the same time. Tawny, you're finally here. Steve heaved a sigh of relief. What's the matter? Why did you call me here in such a hurry? Tawny got up and the iron mask covering his face opened automatically. At the same time, he waved at Banner. Hi. You're here too, Doctor. Banner nodded and replied, the enemy this time seems to be a bit difficult to deal with. Where's Kale? Why isn't your godfather here? Steve frowned and looked up at the sky, then looked around. Kale was nowhere to be seen. Don't you know? Godfather went to Nissan for a vacation. Tawny spread his hands and said straightforwardly. The members of the Avengers and the agents of SHELD looked at each other. The symbol of peace went to Nissan for a vacation? Are you sure it's for a vacation and not for the destruction of the country? Tawny comforted him. Don't worry. Godfather said he knows what he's doing. I hope so. Steve touched his nose. He was really worried. Kale going to Nissan was no small matter. The slightest mistake could escalate into an international issue. With Kale present, it will be safer. Since he's not free, let's get ready. Steve pondered for a moment and suddenly remembered something. He pointed to the inside of the snow forest and explained to Tawny, who had just arrived, it should be one of the hidden bases of the Hydra remnants, so I temporarily called Banna and you to come over and take charge. No way, Hydra base? Tawny was shocked. You know, after Kale and Family Cow last time, the Hydra base on Earth has long been destroyed and he thought that the organization had been disbanded. Natasha continued the conversation and said with certainty, that should be right. This is the information I got after several inspections, and it's not a small base, it's a large base with many Hydra militants. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go. Fortunately, we have enough ammunition on the armor this time. Tawny put on the steel mask, moved his limbs, and looked at the snow forest in front of him. The energy slot in the center of his eyes and chest lit up with a white light. 3 minutes later. In the base fortress deep in the snow forest, a warning siren sounded from inside. We are under attack. We are under attack, all personnel please fight. The Hydra guards in the fortress hurriedly rushed out of the snow forest with energy guns in their hands to fight. Behind them, a red-haired woman and a silver-haired young man stood side by side. They looked at each other, nodded to each other, and followed the Hydra guards out into the battle. At this time, the silence in the snow forest had long been broken by the sound of gunfire. The Avengers, led by Captain America, fought with the Hydra posts built outside the fortress and the Hydra guards who rushed out of the fortress. Steve drove the motorcycle in the complex terrain of the snow forest as if he was driving on flat ground. When he saw the Hydra guards in front of him, he turned his hand and picked up the vibrating gold round shield on his back and threw it forward. The vibrating gold round shield was like a large dart, continuously hitting several Hydra guards who were standing in different positions, and finally returned to Steve's hands in defiance of the laws of physics. Falcon, Hawkeye, and Black Widow fired accurately with guns and bows respectively. Each shot and arrow took away the life of an enemy. Hulk's Banna was even more unstoppable. He rampaged in the snow forest, tearing trees, tanks, small fortresses, and so on into pieces. The battle had just begun, and a group of superheroes had the upper hand, and it became an exaggerated situation of crushing. It's really stable. Tawny, who was flying in the air, smiled and released a few light cannons to eliminate the heavy firepower output points outside the fortress. He said into the microphone, I'll go first. Let's talk about it after we enter the fortress base. I'll leave the outside to you. Go. Steve saw that the situation was very optimistic, so he agreed. After several battles, the Avengers and SHELD had grown a lot, and facing this kind of small-scale battle was a piece of cake. Tawny immediately left the team, accelerated, and rushed toward the fortress building alone. Iron Man left the team, and the one-sided battle was full of surprises. Steve was driving the motorcycle, but suddenly he was pushed by something moving at high speed, and his whole body rolled off the motorcycle and fell into the thick snow. Hawkeye seemed to have noticed something. He squatted on the snow and wanted to aim, but the next moment, he was hit by a figure that was too fast to see clearly, and he did a 180-degree somersault in the air. "Attention, someone on our side is injured. Banna, don't just rush forward, we need your help." Natasha quickly stepped forward to help Hawkeye up and said into the walkie-talkie. Steve got up from the snow and reminded, "Be careful, there are superhumans in the enemy formation." The green giant growled and turned around. However, before he could meet up with Natasha and the others, he saw a red-haired woman appear. There was a mysterious energy in the form of a red mist on her palms. Hulk suddenly stopped and looked at the red-haired woman in confusion. The red mist in her hands was beginning to confuse his already unstable mind. "Go!" The red-haired woman pointed behind her, and Hulk roared, bypassed her, and rushed toward his own formation, violently destroying the four-wheel drive vehicles. "This is bad." Falcon flew in the forest and looked down at Hulk, who had lost control. He said helplessly, "Hulk has lost control. I'll be there right away." Natasha heard this and immediately moved. She was the only one who could barely wake up Hulk. Hearing the anxious words from the people in the channel, Tawny knew that the battle was not going well, but he was thinking of a way to break the electric net defense built by the fortress, and he could not leave for now. "It seems that I have to activate that." Tawny sighed. He originally wanted to discuss with Kale, but now the situation was urgent, and he could only send those people as support. Since he had made up his mind, Tawny no longer hesitated and sent a remote command to Jarvis. "Send the Iron Army over." Chapter 579. Stark Industries, with the SHELD logo, the Avengers headquarters building. Under the remote control of satellite signals in outer space, a metal door automatically opened on the top floor. Silver first-generation armor machines with no paint on the surface and only the appearance of the basic Iron Man suit flew out from it. These steel robots were similar to Iron Man's Mark battle suit. Their chests were energy slots, and their palms and feet were energy release engines. White flames spurted out to accelerate them, and they quickly rose to supersonic flight speed and flew out of New York City in a line. The German border, in the snow forest. Iron Man floated in the air 50 meters high and fired 2 small missiles at the Hydra fortress in front of him. However, before the small missiles could hit the building, they were blocked by an invisible electric grid defense as they approached the fortress dome. "Jarvis. Hurry up, help me analyze the flaws in the opponent's defense system," Tawny ordered. "Yes, sir." Jarvis was still scanning and analyzing when Tawny suddenly turned his head and saw a little light in the sky behind him. After a while, the light turned into silver Iron Men and landed below the snow forest as temporary reinforcements to join the battle. Iron Man Legion. Tawny breathed a sigh of relief. In a hurry, Jarvis's voice came into his ear. "Sir, I found it. Below the right side of the building, about 1 meter above the ground, there is a weak area of the electric grid defense." Hearing this, Tony immediately raised his left hand and fired a missile according to JRVIS's instructions. The moment the missile hit the electric grid defense, it was like a needle piercing the outer electric membrane, and the electric grid defense collapsed completely. "I'm done here. Natasha, it's time to sing a lullaby to the big guy, or my Iron Man Legion will be scrapped." Tawny urged the walkie-talkie and flew into the fortress base. The Hydra guards he encountered along the way raised their guns and hit his steel shell. Sparks flickered. "Are you scratching my itch?" Tawny didn't forget to tease him. He activated the positioning strike on his shoulders and fired more than 10 small cannonballs. The Hydra guards in the fortress fell like wheat. After wiping out the guards in the main building of the fortress, Tawny found the central control room. The members of the Avengers gathered to clean up the Hydra in this fortress base. Naturally, it was important. But more importantly, he had to decipher their internal intelligence and schemes. In the snow forest in front of the fortress. After the Steel Legion joined the battle and joined forces with Steve and the others, the Hydra guards began to lose. Natasha walked over to Hulk, who had lost control and smashed the car. She reached out her hand and whispered, "It's okay. It's getting dark, big guy. It's time to rest." Hulk raised his head and looked at her. His ferocious expression gradually softened. Finally, he gently placed his thick and rough hand on Natasha's hand. In a secluded area beside the snow forest, the red-haired woman and the silver-haired youth hid here, watching the battle in the snowy forest. The red-haired woman could only say softly, "Let's go." "Okay." The silver-haired youth had no objections. He put his hands on the red-haired woman's shoulders. The next moment, the two turned into blurry shadows and rushed out of the snow forest at a speed that could not be captured by the naked eye. As soon as the two superhumans left, the Hydra base completely lost its ability to resist. An hour later, the Avengers' headquarters. After the battle, the Avengers took a fighter jet back here to report the results of the battle. Agent Hill, who had been waiting for a long time, had already analyzed the information submitted by Tawny through SHELD. The other injured members were handed over to professional medical personnel to treat their wounds. "How is it? The harvest this time should be good." Tawny, who had disarmed himself from the battle suit, walked side by side with Agent Hill in the corridor of the building. "It is good. But because of this, we found something incredible." Agent Hill held the virtual tablet and clicked on it while saying, "In the intelligence files of the Hydra remnants, the name of Sokovia in Eastern Europe has appeared many times. It is a city that is nothing special, but its geographical location is special. It has been very turbulent in history. It is not clear what Hydra wants to do to Sokovia." "What about the two superhumans that appeared?" "They defeated Captain, Hawkeye, and Hulk. They should be capable guys." Tawny touched his chin and continued to ask questions. "Okay." Agent Hill did not comment. As his finger swiped, the photos and information of the red-haired woman and the silver-haired youth appeared on the screen of the virtual tablet. The woman is called Wanda, and the man is called Peter. They are twins. Wanda has the ability to transform neurons, sense, and control the mind. Peter has a very fast metabolism and is in thermal balance. One is strange, the other is fast. Agent Hill suddenly paused and said to Tawny, "Kale's family Cal seems to have been looking for these two." "Oh. Godfather." Tawny frowned, but he soon spread his hands and smiled. "That would be great. I thought they were difficult to deal with. If Godfather is interested, then this matter will be easy. Jarvis, call Godfather. This should be good news for him." Tawny immediately sent an order to Jarvis. Jarvis replied, "Sir, it is now 2 in the morning in Nissan. Are you sure you want to call? I almost forgot." Tawny thought for a while and changed the order. "Then wait a little longer. There is no need to rush in these few hours." Above the Iron Army's manufacturing equipment platform was the top floor of the Alliance headquarters. Dr. Bana, who had returned to his human form, held his dizzy head and entered the place with authority. As soon as he entered the studio, he saw a golden virtual ball of light in the middle of the room, floating and rotating slowly. Bana walked over in confusion and reached out to grab the ball of light, but he grabbed nothing. "That is Jarvis." Tawny came in from the door of the studio and explained to Bana, "To be more precise, it is an upgraded version of Jarvis. In the beginning, Jarvis only had knowledge of languages. Now, he can handle matters far beyond anyone else. I let his core program create and command the Iron Army in the headquarters." Yes. Although Jarvis had always been known as an artificial intelligence, it was still only evolving through the system. It could not think outside the system's rules like a human. The only one with artificial intelligence was Kale's vice. "Let me show you something." Tawny smiled mysteriously and took out the virtual tablet. After a few manipulations, a blue flame formed by virtual lines appeared beside the projection of Jarvis's artificial intelligence. What is this? Dr. Bana was stunned. He looked at the virtual flame that appeared in front of him. Why does it look like a human brain? There are neuron signals emitting. Tani smiled and said, that is part of Vice's life core. Without affecting Vice's life, I extracted a small flame from its life program. Through it, Jarvis may evolve into a real artificial intelligence with self-consciousness, and then... Ultron. Bana finished his sentence. Tani nodded solemnly. Yes, Ultron. It is about to open a new era. This was also something he had always wanted to discuss with Kale. Chapter 580. Nissan, Tokyo. Kale went to the Mikado Pavilion and took Sakuragi away. This night was not over, it was just the beginning of all the chaos. 3:00 in the morning. Tokyo was suddenly sealed off, all the police in all districts were dispatched, completely blocking the roads out of the city, forbidding vehicles and people to enter and leave Tokyo. Then military jets, military helicopters, military tanks, and armed military forces, etc., forcibly entered Tokyo in front of the public. This was like throwing a high-explosive grenade into a lake, causing an uproar. The people of Tokyo who woke up from their sleep did not dare to go out of their houses. But on the online forums, the actions of Nissan's higher-ups had been a hot discussion. People with discerning eyes could see that something big had happened in Tokyo. If they were not forced to a certain point, how could Nissan's higher-ups give such an order that could easily arouse the public's anger? After a large number of troops entered Tokyo, with the Mikado Pavilion as the center, they went out to investigate one by one. Some people resisted at first, but the military had a formal and legal search warrant, so they had no choice but to open the door and accept the inspection. These search forces soon approached the area where Kale and others were. At this time, Sakuragi was unaware of the uproar she had caused in the city. She took off her slightly bloated kimono, and her graceful snow-white body was half wrapped in a quilt. Lying on the tatami bed next to Kale, she had closed her eyes and fallen asleep. Her even breathing emitted a faint fragrance of flowers. Yutong stood in front of the window on the second floor. Although the curtains had been drawn, she could still keep track of the situation outside through her mind. "Boss, they are outside the door. Do you want to wake Sakuragi up and leave? Or should I send them away?" Afraid of disturbing the sleeping Sakuragi, Yutong conveyed her thoughts to Kale, who was half lying on the bed. Kale did not respond, just shook his head. He had to say that he still underestimated the importance of Sakuragi in the eyes of Nissan's higher-ups. When they knew that his enemy had come to Nissan, they did not act rashly, but in half an hour after he kidnapped Sakuragi, they made such a crazy move of sealing the city to search for her. Although Sakuragi had the life-saving card to extend her life, her body was still weak and could not move long distances. Nissan seemed to be well aware of this. He took the lead in sealing the city and sent out troops to search the city. Their thoughts and actions were very decisive and reasonable. Unfortunately, their opponent was Kale, who did not play by the rules. Sakuragi. Kale's gaze fell on the sleeping Sakuragi. Under his gaze, a half-broken purple card emerged and hovered around Sakuragi. Cherry Blossom Goddess Bloodline, a copy of the bloodline of the Cherry Blossom Goddess, an ancient deity from Earth. Purple Rare Ability Card. The half-incomplete Cherry Blossom Goddess bloodline had been inherited through extremely high standards of genetic ability replication. The Cherry Blossom Goddess had a special life energy that could heal others, even if they were on the verge of death. Because it was inherited through genetic duplication, it only had half of the effect. Moreover, when healing others, it would consume an equivalent amount of one's lifespan. Current status, unable to draw. Sakura Goddess. Kale looked at Sakura's beautiful sleeping face. He had heard some legends about the ancient gods of Nissan. In Nissan's mythology, the most famous gods were the Cherry Blossom Goddess and Amaterasu. Through the current Sakuragi. Connecting it to Yutong, who was rescued from Nissan's underground research lab 70 years ago. Everything was connected. Kale thought to himself, I didn't expect. Nissan is still secretly researching androids and genetic experiments behind the back of the world. They want to reincarnate a powerful god like the cherry blossom goddess. No wonder after Sakuragi was kidnapped, the higher-ups of Nissan would do such a thing. After all, Sakuragi's body hid a huge secret regarding the creation of gods. Outside the villa's courtyard, a team of fully armed Nissan soldiers stood at the door. The captain held a search warrant and squinted his eyes as he sized up the three-story villa without any lights. Captain, we pressed the doorbell, but no one answered. One of the soldiers reported, according to the registration of this villa, it is Honda Ichiro. It has been vacant since 5 years ago. No one has lived here for a long time. There should be no need to open the door to check, right? What do you think? The captain glared at him and said majestically, tear down the door and force your way in. Not only do you have to search, but also from the first floor to the third floor. Search thoroughly. Don't miss a single spot. Yes. More than a dozen soldiers immediately responded and followed the order. They climbed over the courtyard wall and kicked open the main door on the first floor. Holding a flashlight, they began to search the first floor. The captain looked coldly at the door, but his fingers were nervously placed on the alarm button. If he found anything wrong, he would press the alarm button and let the army come and sweep the area. 5 minutes later, the armed soldiers went from the first floor to the third floor, and then went down from the third floor to the first floor. Only then did they withdraw from the door and shake their heads at the captain outside the door. Captain, the search is complete. There is no one living inside. Is that so? Then the next one. The captain was secretly relieved. His finger moved away from the button without leaving a trace, and he led the armed soldiers to the next house. In the villa that was forcibly searched by Nissan soldiers, the second floor was a mess. In the darkness, there was a reflection of the glass mirror that humans couldn't see. In the mirror space, the hall on the second floor of the villa was still intact. Sakuragi had been sleeping soundly and was not disturbed by any sound. Kale and Yutong stood at the edge of the villa, looking at the distant soldiers through the mirror wall. We still can't contact Logan. Is his disappearance related to Nissan's god-making plan? Yutong whispered. Kale's eyes flashed with a strange light. He shrugged and said, I don't know. But I believe we will know the answer soon. And tonight was just the beginning. Tokyo, Central District. Nissan's most prosperous commercial street. It was originally open 24 hours a day, but because of the intervention of the army and the search, the number of pedestrians and tourists on the street decreased by more than half. But it still almost occupied the sidewalk. It was very lively. Suddenly, dong! A sound rang out in this area, accompanied by a slight tremor. At first, the people on the street thought they heard wrong, but the second and third dong sound, and the accompanying earthquake continued to occur. On the pedestrian street, the noisy crowd suddenly stopped. No one spoke. Everyone looked around in bewilderment, trying to find the source of the strange sound. Dong, dong, dong. The sound on the street became louder and louder, and the earthquake became more and more exaggerated. The water in the cups on the dining table in the restaurant spilled out. The people on the street looked for a long time and finally realized that the sound and movement came from their feet, directly under the ground. Chapter 581. Boom! A loud voice rang out from the ground like an earth vein. This time, a skyscraper on a busy street collapsed. The scene was comparable to a magnitude 8 earthquake. The frightened people on the street could no longer hold it in and fled in panic. The police and the army had already heard the noise. The helicopters in the sky and the tanks on the ground rushed to the scene. Roar! A huge hole was formed where the skyscraper used to be. A loud roar came from the hole and dust filled the city streets. In the center of the most dense dust, a pair of flashing eyes of a giant beast appeared. A civilian helicopter carrying a media reporter was descending. The bright light penetrated the dust and only illuminated a corner of the huge monster's body. "What the hell is that?" The female reporter opened the back door of the helicopter. Despite the high-altitude wind, she poked the camera out of the helicopter and wanted to record first-hand news. At this moment, the live news camera reflected a ferocious mouth full of sharp teeth. The shadow of the mouth just covered the entire helicopter. "No!" The female reporter's desperate cry resounded through the sky of Tokyo. Countless people in the nearby streets looked up and saw the bloody mouth of a lizard-like monster bite the helicopter in the air. The helicopter immediately turned into a burst of fire. The lizard-like monster stepped out of the hole and stepped on the ground of the city road. Its body was more than 50 meters long, a head taller than some buildings. Its body was bloated and huge. It stood on two legs and waved its thick tail casually, destroying a building behind it. "Run! Godzilla, it's Godzilla!" It was unknown who shouted, but the people who were looking at the lizard monster immediately began to flee as if their nest had exploded. The cars in the traffic jam kept honking their horns. Godzilla lowered his head and looked down at the ant-like people. He chased after them on the road, and with a single step, both the people and the car would be crushed into pieces of iron. Many drivers saw this scene and quickly abandoned their cars. Whoosh! A shell swept across the street at high speed and hit Godzilla's head. It turned into a powerful explosion and pressed it to the ground. The fighter jets of the King of the Sky and the tanks of the King of the Land. The army drove modern weapons against the flow of people and headed in the direction of Godzilla. Although it was hit by a shell, Godzilla was still unharmed. It quickly got up from the ground again. It looked at the fighter jets and tanks, raised its claws, raised its neck, and roared furiously. Roar! Godzilla's roar shattered the windows of the nearby buildings and spread far into the air. The entire city of Tokyo could hear this roar. The Nissan officer standing on the off-road vehicle raised his sword and swung it at Godzilla. "Main force, keep moving. Suppressive fire." The unknown Godzilla, Nissan's main force, was on the verge of a battle in the most prosperous city center of Tokyo. Prime Minister's residence, the conference hall on the third floor. The current Prime Minister of Nissan sat in the main seat. The 2 rows of chairs next to the table were occupied by officials and generals who had been summoned at the last minute. The chandelier on the ceiling of the hall swayed. On the table, the glass of water was still vibrating. Even 20 kilometers away, they could still vaguely hear the monster's roar and the sound of artillery bombardment coming from the city center. "I don't need to say anything about the current situation. You all know it very well," the current Prime Minister said with a serious face. Recently, there had been a lot of trouble. First, it was Kale of the United States, then it was Godzilla. One after another, trouble was corroding and destroying New Tokyo. An official asked the general with the highest rank, General Kojiro, "What's the situation in the city center now?" When the other officials heard this, they all focused their eyes on General Kojiro. To be honest, it's not optimistic. General Kojiro took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "That monster called Godzilla is more difficult to deal with than expected. It's definitely not an ordinary ancient creature. Ordinary artillery shells can't do anything to it. Only missiles can barely hurt it." Fortunately, the army was stationed in the city center in advance to provide strong firepower suppression. But if we want to completely deal with it, I'm afraid half of Tokyo will be affected. When the officials heard this, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Half of Tokyo? Wouldn't that mean that they would also fall into the enemy's hands? The current Prime Minister reminded in a cold voice, "Don't forget. There is also that man, who is secretly eyeing us." The officials and generals were silent. When they thought about it, they realized that Tokyo had really reached a moment of life and death. The current Prime Minister narrowed his eyes and said, "Now that things have reached this point, I suggest that we start the second android of the God-making plan." "I agree." General Kojiro was the first to raise his hand. "I agree." "I also agree," the other officials set an example and agreed with this proposal. To deal with the monster, they must awaken the soldiers who are also monsters. Tokyo, somewhere underground. In a secret biochemical research institute, countless scientific researchers wearing white clothes were busy working inside. In the main hall of the institute, there was a cylindrical glass tank filled with liquid. A naked strong man's body was curled up into a ball and wrapped in liquid. The strongest swordsman in the world. Finally, he will be resurrected today. A white-haired old man stood in front of the glass tank and looked up at the strong man soaking in the tank. His face was full of fanaticism and worship. He ordered the researcher next to him, according to the Prime Minister's order, open the tank and let him out. Yes. The white-clothed researcher entered the operation command on the console next to the tank and quickly drained the liquid inside. The sealed tank was opened for the first time, revealing the strong man's body inside. "Wake up, wake up." Under the old man's whisper, the strong man's body trembled slightly. The moment he regained consciousness, his body instinctively stood up and coldly looked at the researcher standing beside him. An unconcealable terrifying aura enveloped the laboratory. This was not an aura that a human should have. The researcher didn't dare to look at him and stepped back in fright. The old man knelt down on one knee and respectfully said, "Official Musashi-sama, welcome to this era." "Where is this?" Musashi looked at him in confusion. The old man replied, "This is the underground of the new Tokyo, which is now the main city of Nissan. It is now the 21st century. It has been 300 or 400 years since your death." "Then why am I?" Musashi looked at his hands. His hands were young and strong, completely unlike the hands of a 60-year-old when he died. He also believed half of the old man's words. It is through the ability of genes. The old man smiled and said, "We collected the key brain genes from your dead body. Using the technology of the current era, we reconstructed your brain and body in the prime of your life." "Boring." Musashi looked at him coldly. "What is the purpose of resurrecting me after 300 or 400 years? The old man's expression didn't change. He replied, "I want you to kill a monster and a man named Kale. In Nissan, only you, the strongest swordsman in the history of Nissan, can do this." Chapter 582. Nissan, central city of Tokyo. It was 4:00 in the morning. The sky was still dark, but the artillery fire raging in the city was like endless fireworks, illuminating the night sky above the city. Within a radius of 300 meters, the bustling pedestrian street and the surrounding skyscrapers had long been razed to the ground and ruined. Flames burned in every corner, and dust and smoke covered the entire area. Nissan's fighter jets, tanks, and off-road vehicles with their own turrets were densely packed, surrounding the scorched area. The powerful firepower did not stop, and there was no need to aim. They just bombarded the area indiscriminately. Under such a powerful firepower, not to mention one mountain, even 10 mountains would have been flattened. But within the concentrated firepower, a huge monster stood in the midst of the dust. A pair of huge beast eyes flashed red, and the monster resisted the artillery shells with its body. From time to time, it let out a deafening roar of anger. "Continue to fire, don't stop." The commanding general stood on the off-road vehicle and looked at the huge beast eyes. He said loudly, "Seal Godzilla here, and don't let it come out. Behind us is the huge city of Tokyo." After this order was passed down, the firepower did not decrease but increased, and the area where Godzilla was turned into a sea of fire. Godzilla was overturned in the pit full of holes. It could not stand up, and its roar became weaker and weaker. In the mirror space. Kale and Yutong were standing not far from the battlefield. They were not affected by the battle, and they were observing the outside world through the mirror. Looking at Godzilla, whose vital signs were weakening, Yutong said softly, "That monster seems to be dying. Don't jump to conclusions so quickly." Kale shook his head, touched his chin, and the corners of his mouth quietly curved up, as if a good show had just started. Yutong was wondering why the boss was so optimistic about the huge and ugly monster in front of them. At this moment, Godzilla, who was lying in the pit of the ruins, had a faint light in its eyes. A blue energy similar to nuclear radiation was increasing from its tail along its spine. That is? Yutong opened her eyes wide. The next moment, after the blue energy condensed to its head, Godzilla faced the street in front of it and opened its jaws to the maximum. With a loud roar, a blue energy beam shot out from Godzilla's mouth. The blue energy beam swept outwards. Everything that was swept by the beam, including the fighter jets, tanks, buildings, and even the ground, was annihilated into nothingness. The entire area was incinerated. The continuous fire suddenly stopped. A few fighter jets flew by at a low altitude. The pilots looked down and saw that several troops had evaporated. They were so frightened that they couldn't speak. In the blink of an eye, half of the street, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, more than a dozen tanks, and several fighter jets were all annihilated by the energy. This monster can use energy? Not to mention the Nissan soldiers, even Yutong was stunned when she saw this scene. With such a powerful body, how could it release nuclear radiation? This was like Hulk emitting light waves. It was a little exaggerated. It's even stronger than the alien dragon species. Kale had expected this. One had to know. The monster egg that hatched Godzilla alone had reached the purple level. It was one level higher than Venom's basic quality. After decades of absorbing energy from the monster egg, Godzilla was born. Even if its ability value didn't exceed purple, it had reached the purple rare level of Hulk. In addition, the monster egg was obtained by drawing cards. Even though they were separated by the mirror dimension, Kyle could still feel a faint sense of dimension from Godzilla's body. After destroying a part of the army, Godzilla got up from the pit again and walked towards the surviving army. Most of the soldiers were frightened and couldn't set up firepower suppression in a short time. Just as Godzilla was about to walk out of the center of the battlefield, a human figure walked out of the army alone. Against the retreating soldiers, he walked towards Godzilla, whose physique was dozens of times larger than his. Oh! In the mirror dimension, Kale and Yutong were the first to notice the figure. Kale narrowed his eyes and observed. He saw that it was a young man with a cold and calm face. His long black hair was tied into a hair whip. He wore a retro gray samurai suit with a samurai sword on both sides of his waist. He kicked the wooden ladder and walked towards Godzilla. "Let's go out and take a look." Kale suddenly raised his left hand and drew a circle with his right hand. Under the splashing of scorching sparks, the portal to leave the mirror dimension opened. He stepped forward and Yutong followed behind. The two left the mirror dimension and came to the roof of a building at the edge of the battlefield. Back in the real world outside, they could feel that the air was slightly hot and there was a thick smell of gunpowder everywhere. Yutong's eyes flashed with silver light. She immediately focused her mind on the young man with the sword, trying to read his mind. Her pupils quickly contracted. He is Yamamoto Musashi. Yamamoto Musashi? Kale naturally heard of this name. Yamamoto Musashi. In Nissan, he was the #1 swordsman in history. He deserved to be called the strongest swordsman. He had never been defeated in his life. In Nissan, although Yamamoto Musashi was only a mortal, his reputation was more powerful than the cherry blossom goddess and Amaterasu. He was a god that was comparable to the gods. It can't be wrong. Yutong nodded and said confidently, "His memories are not complete. They are fragmented and messy. It's a bit difficult to read his mind, but most of those memories are flashbacks from 1600 years. It doesn't seem to be brainwashed. Kale looked at Yamamoto Musashi and said thoughtfully, "It seems that this is Nissan's secret weapon. Through the God-making plan, the strongest swordsman in history is reborn in the world." In the battle, Godzilla looked down and saw the human walking towards it. It opened its bloody mouth and roared. Yamamoto Musashi ignored the sound waves and wind. When he was 10 meters away, he put his hands on the hilt of his sword and rushed towards Godzilla. Godzilla was infuriated. It raised its left foot and stomped towards Yamamoto Musashi. Yamamoto Musashi only cared about his own charge. The moment his foot landed, he rolled a few times on the ground to avoid being trampled. At the same time, he kicked Godzilla's right foot with his wooden clogs. Surprisingly, he was able to agilely step on Godzilla's body and leap more than 10 meters high. Not bad. Yu Tong was surprised. Not only that. Kale continued. Yamamoto Musashi's body was not something a human could do. Yamamoto Musashi's body was at least beyond the limits of human genes. There was one more thing. As everyone knew, Yamamoto Musashi's strongest skill was not his body, but his famous swordsmanship. Yamamoto Musashi flew to Godzilla's upper body. He looked at Godzilla's neck and pulled back his sword. He finally unsheathed his swords. Chapter 583. The twin swords held by the cyborg Yamamoto Musashi, just like him, had an extraordinary origin. The sword in his left hand was the Kusanagi sword. In the Nissan area, it was one of the 3 divine weapons that had been passed down since ancient times. It often appeared in the local myths and symbolized the royal power of the Nissan kingdom. The sword in his right hand was the Tatsuka sword, which was only slightly inferior to the Kusanagi sword. This sword was almost used in the local myths of Nissan. It could be said that it was an undeniable sword of the gods. These 2 legendary swords had been kept in the National Museum of Japan for decades. Now, they were the swords of the strongest swordsman. Good swords accompanied the swordsman, so it could be said that they had made full use of them. In the battle filled with flames and smoke, along Godzilla's mountain-like body, Musashi ignored the gravity and flew upwards. He leaped high into the air, and the moment the 2 swords were unsheathed from his waist, each blossomed with a snow-white cold light. Niten Ichiro, slash. Yamamoto Musashi's twin swords fell on Godzilla's neck. With a faint flash of light, the swords tore open a cross-shaped wound on Godzilla's neck. Blood spurted out as if it was free, sprinkling on Yamamoto Musashi's body. Seeing this scene, the soldiers of Nissan were all stunned. Godzilla's tough outer skin that could withstand the bombardment of firearms and artillery shells was actually broken by a cold weapon. Yamamoto Musashi's body was bathed in Godzilla's blood, but he was indifferent. With the twin swords in his hands, he kicked and jumped on top of Godzilla's head. Then, from the top of Godzilla's head to the back, he kept slashing as he ran. Godzilla roared angrily. Unfortunately, its body was too big, so there were both advantages and disadvantages. In front of Yamamoto Musashi, its movements were clumsy and redundant. Boss. That is. Yu Tong's eyes flashed with silver light. Her eyes were locked on Yamamoto Musashi, as if she was analyzing it with her super-intelligent mind. That is a domain, a kendo domain, Kale said with certainty. Domain referred to the highest realm of a certain skill or talent after reaching the peak of the mastery realm. When this skill was extraordinary, it could be called a domain. It couldn't be judged by common sense, and could even be comparable to special abilities. Here's an example. It could be said that Captain America had the shield bash domain. He could throw his shield from any angle and hit any number of enemies. This level had already surpassed the abilities and skills that humans could possess. The Alpha Centauri that Kale encountered before was able to injure him with just a slash of his sword with his peak human body. It already had a bit of the charm of a domain, but he had yet to fully comprehend it. As for Musashi, he had already thoroughly comprehended the field of sword principle. Therefore, each of his slashes contained the strongest force that his inhuman body could unleash, as well as the most exquisite and perfect swordsmanship. Coupled with the two top-notch cold weapons in his hands, he was able to cause effective damage to Godzilla. Yamamoto Musashi was as agile as a monkey. He jumped up and down on Godzilla's body, brushing past the surface of Godzilla's body, causing a large amount of blood to splash out. Soon, Godzilla's body was covered with cuts and bruises. Godzilla kept circling in place, roaring angrily, but there was nothing he could do about the official Musashi. After a protracted battle with Nissan's army, its physical strength was severely depleted. Coupled with the forced use of nuclear energy cannons that it was not very good at, its body was almost hollowed out. In any case, Godzilla was just a child that had just hatched for a day or two. A child with a height of 50 meters had not yet fully developed. Boss. If this goes on, the lizard monster will really die. Yutong looked at Kale, waiting for his instructions. Although Yamamoto Musashi could only cause small wounds, as the saying goes, ants can bite an elephant to death. As long as they continue to exhaust Godzilla, the exhausted Godzilla will soon fall completely. Let's go. Kale's mouth curved upward. Godzilla was hatched from his own egg. Whether he wants to kill it or not, it depends on the owner. Ha! Yamamoto Musashi, covered in blood, fell from Godzilla's shoulder. His two swords pierced into Godzilla's hard skin. Relying on his weight and gravity, he dived down and cut two long wounds on Godzilla's back. Blood suddenly poured down like a waterfall. With a loud bang, the entire downtown area of Tokyo shook. Godzilla lay on the ground tiredly. Blood flowed everywhere. It opened its mouth and let out a weak cry. Its body was covered with cuts and wounds, but they were not fatal. It was just that it was too tired to lie on the ground to rest. He's a monster from head to toe. Yamamoto Musashi was holding two blood-stained swords. He was panting slightly as he walked in front of Godzilla and looked into its eyes. This was the huge gap between biological genes. Even if he mastered the kendo domain, had the best cold weapons, and had all kinds of advantages, he still couldn't kill Godzilla. Godzilla's nostrils exhaled hot air, and it began to grind its teeth. Its fierce eyes reflected Yamamoto Musashi's figure. It wanted to swallow him whole. Do you have intelligence? I can't kill you, but I can blind you. Yamamoto Musashi's face was calm. He dragged his two swords and walked towards Godzilla. Right at this moment, a heavy and light landing sound came from behind him. Yamamoto Musashi looked back and saw a tall blonde young man and a beautiful woman with two swords on her back. It was Kale and Yutong who came to the battle. Are you also a swordsman? Yamamoto Musashi looked at Yutong first. Just from the exposed sword hilt, he recognized that the two swords on her back were not ordinary weapons. Not really. These are the spoils of war of the boss. Yutong responded with a smile. She carried them on her back. One was the cursed blade Murasame, and the other was the cursed blade used by Alpha Centauri. These two cursed blades were both made of sodium carbon steel, so the wounds caused by them were difficult to heal by themselves. It was the best combination with her telekinesis ability. Oh! Yamamoto Musashi's eyes fell back on Kale. His pupils shrank slightly. His always calm face was slightly moved. He recognized that he was his second goal when he reappeared in the world. He was also the foreign mutant that Nissan couldn't deal with in the past few decades. Godzilla looked at Kale in front of him. Its originally fierce and ruthless eyes revealed a trace of human-like doubt. It didn't know why, but it felt an indescribable sense of intimacy from this human. Yamamoto Musashi stared at Kale. His 5 fingers subconsciously clenched the hilt of his sword. His body and mind were as tense as a bowstring. Contrary to Godzilla, he felt an unprecedented pressure from Kale. In the old era, the world couldn't give him such pressure. His body instinctively wanted to tremble. Yamamoto Musashi suppressed his throbbing body and mind with a strong will. At the same time, he couldn't hide his excitement and said, "You are so strong. I have never met a strong person like you in my previous life." This made me extremely excited, and the blood in my entire body was boiling. Yamamoto Musashi was like a madman, looking at Kale with fanaticism. Chapter 584. It was nearly 6 o'clock, and the eastern sky had already turned white. Half of the night in Tokyo City receded like the tide, and the central city was still fighting. "Take your maid's sword in your hand and fight with me." Yamamoto Musashi evenly controlled his breathing, blue veins protruded on his forehead, and said to Kale while holding the two swords. Since the battle with Sasaki Kojiro, he was invincible in Nissan Kendo until he died at the age of 60, and no one could arouse his desire to fight again. Every time, before the battle, he already knew the outcome. This kind of feeling was boring and tasteless. But encountering Kale of this era, Yamamoto Musashi experienced in advance, enough to suppress his body and mind, which he had never felt in that era. "I'm not a samurai or a swordsman, I don't need a sword." Kale smiled indifferently, let Yutong stay in place, and stepped forward alone. In front of Yamamoto Musashi, he raised his left hand and slowly stretched out a middle finger. "Come on, this is my weapon." Yutong couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh behind his back. The boss occasionally had such a playful side. "Are you joking with me?" Yamamoto Musashi raised his eyebrows coldly, and his face showed anger. Although he didn't know what the middle finger meant, he vaguely knew that he had been greatly humiliated. No matter what, he was also the strongest in Nissan, the strongest swordsman that no one could stand on equal footing with. "Can't you show some respect to your predecessors?" "Okay, I'll be serious." Kale nodded, and then stretched out his index finger. His index and middle fingers formed a sword shape in front of him. Courting death. Yamamoto Musashi was really angry. Holding the two swords, he rushed forward like an arrow. In the blink of an eye, he rushed to the front of Kale, two cold sword lights flashed, and the two swords in his hands attacked Kale from different angles. Kale didn't see any movement, but when the two swords were about to cut him, his two fingers appeared a dazzling streamer, and then he moved his two fingers at a very fast speed. In a short period of time, his fingers blocked the sharp blades from the left and right, producing clanging sounds of metal clashing against metal. Yamamoto Musashi only felt a huge rebounding force coming from his hands that were holding the sword hilts. The web between his thumb and forefinger was severely shaken, and the two swords almost flew out of his hands. Yamamoto Musashi was sent flying backwards. His wooden clogs continuously stomped on the ground, and he retreated nearly 5 meters before he was able to slow down the force. He looked at the flowing light on Kale's two fingers in disbelief. What kind of power is that? Although it was just a test, he still used 80 to 90% of his strength. However, not only did the other party react to the extremely fast slash, he even managed to deflect it back with his finger. Continue. Kale's finger was imbued with the power of 2 stars. Curling his finger, Kale looked a little listless. He really couldn't take Shengguan Ben Musashi seriously. The difference in strength between the two of them was like one was a martial artist and the other was an immortal cultivator. There was a huge gap between them and there was no way they could fight on equal terms. How could it be that there's such a huge difference? Yamamoto Musashi was drenched in cold sweat. He couldn't accept this fact. He kicked his wooden clogs and continued to rush forward. This time, he used the Nidden Ichiryu that he was most proud of in his life. The moment he rushed near Kale, the 2 swords in his hands turned into afterimages, and in half a second, he slashed out more than 10 slashes. But for Kale, this was still too slow. Along with the clanging sounds, Kale easily blocked the slashes of the divine swords with his 2 fingers. In the end, he simply used his fingers to clamp the blades of the two swords. Yamamoto Musashi was sweating profusely. He struggled to pull the swords back, but the clamped swords didn't move at all. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't pull them out. "Is that enough?" Kale calmly asked. Yamamoto Musashi loosened his grip on the swords and looked at Kale. He smiled bitterly and helplessly. "I didn't expect that I would be defeated a few hundred years later. Moreover, I was defeated by the finger sword." Kale held the two swords and swung them back. The two swords that Nissan regarded as divine weapons drew two arcs in the air and were firmly caught by Yutong behind him. "I hope you can kill me with your strongest power. Let me see the gap between us." Yamamoto Musashi took a deep breath and opened his hands to Kale, exposing his defenseless chest. "As you wish." Kale spread out his left hand. His whole palm was covered by the energy of the two stars. A dazzling light flowed on his left arm. He flipped his palm and pushed it forward. A dazzling energy beam shot out. Yamamoto Musashi, who was enveloped by it, was instantly annihilated into nothingness. The energy beam passed over Godzilla's head and penetrated a few tall buildings 500 meters away until it disappeared into the eastern horizon. A ray of golden sunlight shone through the holes in the tall buildings and shone on the messy battlefield. After dealing with Yamamoto Musashi, Kale walked in front of Godzilla and looked into its cold beast eyes. "It's dawn. Do you still want to lie on the ground and be a live target for others?" Godzilla's nostrils spewed out hot steam. Most of the wounds on its body had already scabbed. Not only was its defense amazing, its self-healing ability was also at the top of the food chain. Standing up from the ground, Godzilla didn't attack Kale. It didn't even show any hostility. After giving him a deep look, it shook its head and wagged its tail, then drilled into the huge hole. After a while, Godzilla disappeared from the city. "What a troublemaker." Kale shrugged and looked at Yutong, who was carrying 4 swords on her back. Behind her, the Nissan army that had completely lost their fighting spirit. "Let's get out of here first." Kale thought for a while and walked toward Yutong. But just as he took a step, he suddenly looked sideways and looked in a direction. His golden eyes reflected a black flame that was rapidly approaching. Bang! As if he couldn't react in time, Kyle was hit by the black flames. His body was covered in flames in an instant, burning him into a flaming man. Even the ground within a 5-meter radius was ignited with black flames. "Boss!" Yutong exclaimed and looked in the direction of the black flames. She saw that Logan had been standing there 30 meters away. She didn't know when he had appeared. That's right. The one who suddenly launched the black flame attack on Kale was Wolverine Logan, who had sent an emergency signal to contact his family and asked Kale to come to Nissan. Logan was wearing a set of Nissan's white haori and a jade necklace around his neck. He was holding a bronze mirror engraved with strange symbols in his hands. He was wearing wooden clogs and walking forward. "Logan? No, who are you?" Yutong's eyes flashed silver. She wanted to read Logan's mind, but she was blocked by a strange and powerful consciousness that resided in Logan's body. "I am Amaterasu. You can call me Lord Amaterasu." Logan looked indifferent. He looked at Kale, who was covered in black flame, and whispered, "Things that are illuminated by the Amaterasu's divine flame will not be extinguished. They will continue to burn. Burn to ashes like this, demon sinner." Chapter 585. In the middle of the battle. Logan. No, it should be Amaterasu. He looked at Kale, who was turned into a ball of black flame by Amaterasu, with a smirk on his face. Victory was within his grasp. The black flame was different from normal flames. It was a special flame that followed a certain law. It was an eternal flame that could burn everything into ashes. Yutong was calm, as if she did not care about Kale's safety at all. "Now, it's your turn." Amaterasu looked coldly at Yutong. Just as he was about to turn the bronze mirror in his hand, Yata no Kagami, a sentence came out from the black flame. "I'm not dead yet." "What?" Amaterasu's face changed. He looked to the side and saw the black flame of Amaterasu extinguishing bit by bit until it shrunk into a small ball of black flame, floating on Kale's left hand. Not only was Kale unharmed, even his clothes were not burned. How is this possible? Amaterasu was stunned. That was the flame of Amaterasu. Even he would be burned if he touched it. But now, the black flame in Kale's hand was as obedient as a little black cat. Kale did not know what to say. He could have used a special flame to attack anyone, but he chose to sneak up on him. He was the god of fire. His genes had transformed into a god, and his blood was filled with burning flames. Not only could he control any flame, but other than the eternal flame, all other flames were no threat to him. The black flame was similar to the eternal flame, but it was far from it. So, Logan was controlled by you, the Esper of the past who claimed to be a god. Kyle looked at Logan at this time, and the two Japanese divine artifacts on his body, the Yata no Kagami and the Yasukani no Magatama, as well as what Logan had said just now, and he had a rough idea of what was going on. The Nissan government had not stopped their genetic experiments since the 70s, when he took Yutong away. Finally, in the 21st century, they found 3 ways to create a god. The first type. Extracting the DNA genes left behind by the ancestors' corpses and using them as genetic embryos to create androids that inherited similar abilities. Sakuragi, who was still in the mirror dimension, should have been created using this method to create the second Sakura goddess. The advantage of this method was that they could inherit the abilities of their ancestors. The disadvantage was that they would not be able to inherit the memories of their ancestors. They would be equivalent to a brand new life without any combat experience or the consciousness of the goddess. Then, there was the second type. He extracted the inherited genes and brain cells from the corpses of his ancestors and reconstructed the brain and body perfectly. This method was superior to the first method, as it could truly resurrect the ancestors. Although their memories and strength would be incomplete, they could still be regarded as perfect warriors. This was the official Musashi from earlier. In the end, the third one was the manifestation of the Amaterasu. When Amaterasu was alive, he might have been a superhuman whose soul and spirit were different from ordinary people. After he died, his soul and spirit would reside in people and objects to extend his life. Unfortunately, his soul was too powerful. Even if he could possess an ordinary person's body wouldn't be able to withstand it. Even if he could withstand it, he wouldn't be able to reach the level of strength he had when he was alive. This was the case. Until Logan, who had unlimited self-healing abilities and a super-strong body, came to Nissan. Amaterasu's powerful soul and spirit finally had a perfect host. This is impossible. Amaterasu couldn't accept the fact that the Amaterasu's black flames were ineffective. He raised the bronze mirror and reflected a ray of sunlight at Kale. The power of the ray of sunlight seemed to be magnified thousands of times and turned into a raging tide of black flames. Don't you understand? Kale sighed and raised his hand. The tide of flames immediately split into 2 and swept past him. Finally, the flames condensed into a small ball and floated above his hand. Kyle gently opened his mouth and swallowed the compressed black flame in his hand. It was as if he was taking a puff of a cigarette. He gently exhaled a few rings of white smoke. Even Amaterasu trembled and took a few steps back. At this moment, he finally understood that Nissan had messed with someone he shouldn't have messed with. The current man was simply not in existence that this island country could deal with. Trying to run? Kale moved his body and came before Amaterasu. He grabbed the jade around his neck and looked down at him coldly. Get out of Logan's body right now. Amaterasu's eyes flashed as he struggled. He gritted his teeth and sneered. That's impossible. He was still fearless. After all, he was just a soul and didn't have a real body. That meant that there was no way he could die again. Even if Kale destroyed Logan's body, it wouldn't be a threat to him. Yu Tong. Kale called. Yu Tong knew what he meant. She immediately extended her soul and tried to drive Amaterasu's soul away from Logan's body. But soon, she raised an eyebrow. Boss. His soul has merged with Logan's body for a while now. I am being rejected by both my soul and body. The man in Logan's body is only slightly weaker than me. I can't affect him directly. Yu Tong said to Kale. Kale was silent. You guys are powerful, but you can't do anything to me. Amaterasu smiled. His fear and trembling were gone. Interesting. Let's play then. Kyle pushed Amaterasu to the ground, then drew a line in the air to draw something out from his card space. Amaterasu's eyes widened. It was a golden plate in Kale's hand. There was an ordinary flame burning on the plate. Are you sure you don't want to come out? Kale held the plate and looked down at Amaterasu. Amaterasu wanted to laugh. He was even a little disappointed. He thought that Chen Xiaobei had some tricks up his sleeve. How could he threaten him with this ordinary flame? Right now, he was in a state where he had nothing to lose and was not afraid of boiling water. Yu Tong smiled. She knew that the flame in Chen Xiaobei's hand was not an ordinary flame. You won't give up until you see the coffin. Kyle shook his head and covered the plate with his other hand. The red flame spilled out of the plate and covered Amaterasu's legs. Amaterasu's smile froze on his face. He did not expect Kale to be so decisive. Wasn't the body he was unfamiliar with? Also, when the ordinary flame landed on the body's legs, Amaterasu felt as if his soul was being burned by the flame. He was in excruciating pain. Ah! Amaterasu screamed like a pig being slaughtered and rolled on the ground. Kale sighed. The first flame born at the beginning of the universe, the eternal flame. It could even burn souls. Chapter 586. Even Hulk was burned by the eternity flame, let alone Logan. The eternity flame looked no different from a normal flame, but it could burn a real deity to death. The eternity flame burned brightly on Logan's feet, and soon, even his bones were exposed. Tenzhou, who had taken over Logan's body, could feel that his spiritual body, which had been immortal for hundreds of years, was being burned away. He could not help but cry out in pain. You don't know, do you? Kale held the golden plate and looked at Tenzhou, who was rolling on the ground. He said nonchalantly, the body that you have taken over is just a servant of my family. I am only here to fulfill my family's duty. If you like that body so much, then burn it into nothingness with it. His words broke Tenshu's defenses. He knew that he could not use the body to blackmail Tenzhou. He clenched his teeth and made a decision in his heart. He closed his eyes. Tenshu's divine artifact, the Magatama, cracked. Then, a translucent human body that was invisible to normal people emerged from Logan's body, which was being burned by the eternity flame. It flew out quickly, trying to escape from the battle. Trying to run? Yu Tong's eyes shone with silver light. She was ready to stop it. Although she could not see the translucent spiritual body, her will could cover an area of 100 meters. When Tenshu's soul left Logan's body, she could feel the subtle magnetic force that was being emitted by the spiritual body. Found you. Yu Tong smiled. She reached out and formed a translucent giant palm with her will. It was as if she was holding a non-existent human body in her hand. Yu Tong. Kale raised the golden plate. Yu Tong understood what he meant. She flipped the giant palm over and threw the object in her hand towards the golden plate. Ah! The eternity flame shot up 1/2 meter. Screams of agony could be heard from within the golden plate. Kale simply put the golden fire plate back into the card space, and the battle immediately quieted down. Yutong looked down at Logan's charred feet. Logan was still unconscious. After Amaterasu's spirit threw the eternal flame into the jade Magatama around his neck, the cracks on its surface became bigger and bigger until the jade Magatama turned into dust. So that's how it is, Yutong sighed and reported to Kale, Logan should be fine. Just now, it was the jade hook that he was wearing that imprisoned his soul. Now that the jade hook has shattered, his soul has returned to his body. On the contrary, Logan's self-healing factor didn't work on the burns caused by the eternal fire. Fortunately, I have the eternal fire. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do anything to him. Kale shook his head. Alpha Centauri knew best how to deal with souls. Unfortunately, after so many years, he had not been able to draw the relevant ability card from those mages. He could only wait for Doctor Strange to appear. It was 6:30. The sun was slowly rising, and the golden sunlight fell on Kale, Yutong, and Logan, who was lying on the ground. The surrounding 500 meters was clearly in ruins. For Nissan, the darkest night in history was finally over. Take Logan, it's time to go. Kale put on the ring on his left hand and drew a circle with his right hand, creating a circular portal in front of them. Understood. Yutong responded. She carried the 4 swords on her back and grabbed the air with one hand. Her mind floated the unconscious Logan up. Just as Kale walked towards the portal, a small black shadow suddenly flew from the sky not far away from the city. A familiar voice called out, "Master, wait for me." Kale stopped and squinted, looking in that direction in surprise. They saw a small plane with eyes and a mouth flying towards them. As it approached the ground, the small plane transformed into a small square robot. "Vice, why are you here?" Yutong looked at the other party in surprise. "I'm Master's AI butler, of course, you can't leave me behind wherever you go." Vice was full of pride, trotted forward and jumped on Kale's shoulder. "You still have the nerve to say that?" Kale glanced at it in annoyance. Vice, when it returned to Earth, liked to run to Stark Industries and Tawny's house all day long. It was lucky to see it. Now that the matter with Nissan was settled, it came late. Vice touched its nose like a human and reported, "Master, I have important news to report." "What news?" Kale asked. Vice replied, "The Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, the twins have appeared." "What?" Yutong's heart skipped a beat when she heard this, and she subconsciously looked at Kale. Kale's body trembled, and his eyes lit up. This news tugged at his heartstrings. The twins were Lorna's relatives. When Lorna first joined the family, the poison agent and family Cal had been looking for their whereabouts all over the world. Unfortunately, until Lorna left Earth and was captured by Thanos' subordinates, there was no news of their whereabouts or information. He didn't expect that they would finally appear now. "Let's go. We'll talk after we get out of here." Kale entered the portal, and Yutong followed behind with Logan. Inside the mirror dimension. The Japanese-style villa here was intact and unaffected by the real world. Sakuragi had already changed into a kimono and was sitting on the ground, looking at the round portal in front of her that was spinning with sparks. When she saw Kale coming in through the portal, Sakuragi almost subconsciously got up and threw herself into his arms. Kale hugged Sakuragi's soft and slender waist, patted her back, and pointed behind him and said, "Someone is injured. Sakuragi, can you heal him?" Sakuragi poked her head out of Kale's body, and Yutong walked in through the portal. She controlled Logan's body with her mind and slowly moved him onto the tatami. "He's seriously injured, let me try." Chapter 587. At noon, it was a sunny day with no clouds in sight. Today was another peaceful day in the New York neighborhood that had been plagued by disasters. Of course not. At this moment. The bustling streets of New York were in chaos with horrifying screams everywhere. The local people seemed to be used to taking refuge. In a panic, they skillfully abandoned their cars and fled to another street. Obviously, even the police couldn't cope with the sudden situation. The armed police officer's face was full of horror as he hid behind the police car and looked in the direction of the people's backs. There were faint roars and banging sounds of monsters, flames raging, smoke filling the streets, and buildings collapsing from time to time. Under the astonished gaze of the police, a green monster wearing large underpants walked out of the thick smoke. His strong muscles and veins bulged, his eyes flashed with anger, and his teeth chattered. He casually lifted a car and threw it towards the police car parked 10 meters away. The two police officers hiding behind the police car didn't have time to dodge and subconsciously closed their eyes. Then, a tall and burly figure landed in front of the police car and stretched out a pair of golden-red mechanical palms to catch the thrown car. The police opened their eyes and saw Iron Man. To be more precise, it should be a special strong version of Iron Man compared to Iron Man's usual Mark armor model. The Mark armor worn by Iron Man was tall and strong and slightly bloated, like a steel version of Iron Man. It greatly reduced the agility, but because of this, it had higher horsepower and braking explosive power. This was a special Mark armor developed by Tawny and Banna to deal with the angry Hulk, the anti-Hulk armor. Hulk is a big guy. Throwing things is a bad habit. Not to mention hitting people. What if it hits flowers and plants? Tawny, wearing the anti-Hulk armor, put the car aside and didn't forget to send a voice message, saying to the outside, "Please evacuate everyone here, this place is taken over by the Avengers." "Then I'll leave it to you. We can't deal with it." The two police officers were relieved and didn't even care about the police car as they followed the people to evacuate to the street. The angry Hulk didn't care so much. Now he had lost his mind, his eyes seemed to be burning with anger as he rushed toward Iron Man. "Come on, baby." After all, Tawny was wearing the anti-Hulk armor. He took a deep breath and ordered the AI system, increase the braking force of the right arm to the maximum. At the same time, he moved his mechanical right arm slightly backward. Roar! Hulk rushed forward and punched out. Tawny saw the opportunity and punched out as well. Hulk's fist and mechanical fist. They represented the pinnacle of mutation and technology respectively. When the two fists of the same size collided with each other, a powerful shockwave swept out, shattering the surrounding glass doors and windows into pieces. Hulk and Iron Man stood still and no one retreated. They directly punched each other with their fists and feet. It was a pity. Even if the anti-Hulk armor was created specifically for Hulk, which greatly increased the armor's defensive capabilities, resistance to attacks, and explosive power in close combat, it would only be a relatively meaty sandbag in front of the angry Hulk. In less than 10 seconds, Tawny's anti-Hulk armor was covered in bruises. His helmet and his entire right arm were almost destroyed. So ruthless. Godfather, how did he subdue Hulk with his physique? After being sent flying 10 meters away by Hulk, Tony got up from the ground, raised his mechanical left hand, and shot out an energy beam that was thicker than the one released by the conventional armor, thus delaying Hulk's pursuit. Taking advantage of this short gap, Tawny in the anti-Hulk armor quickly issued a voice command. "Veronica, help. Veronica." It was an independent system and armor library jointly developed by him and Dr. Banna. During the development, Hulk even participated in actual combat tests. It is usually deployed in outer space near the Earth and can be quickly deployed when necessary. The anti-Hulk armor was also urgently transferred from Veronica. Veronica, like a square arsenal, landed and suspended 100 meters above New York City. After receiving Tawny's instructions, she immediately released a pile of brand new parts. These parts have their own flight braking and positioning navigation, actively flying towards the Iron Man on the ground to update and replace the damaged parts. Within 3 seconds, the anti-Hulk armor driven by Tawny was restored to its original state. It has a logistics system that can be repaired and supplied at any time. This is the main reason why this armor can theoretically subdue Hulk. Tawny, who was resurrected with full blood, continued to fight Hulk. The two fought from the street to the end of the street, from the ground to the sky, and the area within a kilometer turned into a battlefield. Some of the buildings that were affected by the battle either collapsed into ruins or were riddled with holes. Tawny's anti-Hulk armor has been repaired for several rounds, but Hulk became angrier and angrier as he fought, and it was difficult to determine the winner for a while. Tawny watched the battle ravaging the city and was secretly anxious. He suddenly reached out and grabbed Hulk's neck. The soles of his feet erupted with a force comparable to a small rocket, and he took Hulk to the sky. After reaching a height of hundreds of meters, Tawny picked up an uninhabited engineering building and pressed Hulk down like a meteorite. Rumble, an engineering building collapsed into ruins in an instant, and dust flew everywhere. Hulk was still a little dizzy and looked left and right for Tawny's location. At this moment, a mechanical fist smashed towards the back of his head. At the critical moment, a human palm from a third party, under a dazzling light, suddenly inserted itself into the battle between the two and easily received the anti-Hulk armor's punch. Tawny stared in surprise. Hulk reacted and clenched his fist to the back, but it was also easily blocked by the hand with a dazzling light. I'll talk. Between Tawny and Hulk, there was an additional dazzling young figure. You've only left New York for 2 or 3 days, what new tricks have you come up with? You even started fighting in the city. Civil war? Tawny looked at the newcomer and slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Godfather, you're finally back. Hulk, in an angry state, would be extremely aggressive towards any living creature. But facing the newcomer, he was surprisingly calm and did not continue to go crazy, as if he had remembered the painful lessons of the past. Tell me, what happened here? Kale, in the dual star form, had a pair of dazzling eyes. His silver hair was burning and standing up, and the surface of his body was flowing with energy. His left and right hands were holding the anti-Hulk armor and a few of Hulk's fingers. With the powerful strength of a dominator, he forcibly stopped the battle. It's a long story. The helmet of the anti-Hulk armor opened, revealing Tawny's face. He sighed and said, Ultron betrayed me and joined forces with the twins to destroy the Avengers. Now, except for me, the rest of the Avengers have all been defeated. Overnight, New York had changed. Chapter 588. Ultron? Kale pondered and finally remembered that in the original history of Marvel, there was indeed such a villain. Originally, it was Iron Man Tawny who created the Ultron system in order to build the Iron Legion to protect the Earth. As a result, Ultron, who had independent thinking, deduced through a formula that humans would eventually destroy the Earth. Therefore, after swallowing the AI butler Jarvis, he betrayed the Iron Legion with the intention of destroying the Avengers and all humans on Earth. Godfather, it's my fault. I was too anxious. I wanted to discuss it with you first. Tawny sighed softly. You're not a child. Kale shook his head and released Tawny's mechanical hand. You have your own judgment. You don't have to ask me for my opinion. If you made a mistake this time, you can fix it. No one can make the right decision every time without experiencing failure. But Godfather, you can. Tawny looked at Kale seriously. He sighed in his heart. Sure enough, even if he kept chasing desperately, he would never be able to reach the height of Godfather. Kale was non-committal. He was a time traveler and knew some things and mysteries in advance. It was really difficult to go the wrong way. Hulk, aren't you going to sleep? Kale looked up at Hulk. In the double star form, he pulled Hulk's hand down and pressed it to his side, unable to break free. The anger in Hulk's eyes hadn't faded, but his subconscious told him that he couldn't beat Kale in front of him. He was in a contradictory state of wanting to fight and wanting to escape. Tani explained, Dr. Banna's mind was confused by the little Scarlet Witch. Not only him, but Captain, Natasha, Falcon, and almost everyone in the Avengers lost their minds just now. That will have to wait for Yutong to come. She is good at dealing with this kind of situation. Kale's words just fell and he looked up as if he sensed something. A beam of rainbow light shot from the end of the universe and pierced through the Earth's atmosphere. It brushed past his hand and hit Hulk. Tani subconsciously took a few steps back. Then, he saw a handsome man with a hammer in his hand and a red cloak fluttering in the wind. It was Thor, who had been busy fighting all over the 9 realms recently. Thor, what brings you here? Kale looked at Thor, who appeared in front of him. Ever since the Celestial Convergence incident, the two of them had not drunk together for a long time. It's Heimdall. He saw the abnormal situation on Earth. It just so happens that the dispute between the 9 realms is almost settled, so I came to see if I can help. Thor glanced at the chaotic city streets and shrugged. It seems so. You came at the right time. Tani looked down and stared at Thor's feet. Kale deactivated his double star form and also used his finger to signal Thor's feet. Huh? Thor looked down and realized that he was standing on Hulk's broad back. Hulk had already fainted and was lying on the ground with his arms and legs spread out. There was a special round pattern of the rainbow bridge on his back and it was emitting a faint fragrance of meat. Sorry. A few drops of cold sweat appeared on Thor's forehead as he hurriedly jumped off Hulk. He did not want to experience the feeling of being grabbed by Hulk and being smashed around on the ground like his brother. The clouds were broken by an invisible Eagle fighter jet. The fighter jet flew toward the city where Kale and the others were and slowly descended. The deck at the back opened and Yutong was standing on the edge, waiting for orders. Take Hulk and get on the fighter jet first. Let's see how the others are doing. Kale, Thor, and Tani, who was wearing the anti-Hulk armor, all 3 of them could fly. Tani carried Hulk on his mechanical shoulder and flew into the fighter jet. The headquarters of the Avengers was a mess after being attacked by Ultron's Iron Man Legion. When Kale led everyone to find Captain America, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Falcon, and others, everyone was basically injured and depressed. Seeing the return of Kale and Thor, the members of the Avengers were secretly relieved and the worry on their faces lessened a little. They were still defeated by Ultron and the twins in the presence of most of the members, which was embarrassing enough. On the Eagle fighter jet, Hulk changed back into Dr. Banna's appearance and followed Logan. The two hugged each other and lay on a low chair, unconscious. Most of the heroes who suffered a heavy blow sat in their chairs in depression and silence. Kale had just left New York for 2 or 3 days, and they couldn't defend their home. It was really shameful. Now, we have to find a place to rest first and then look for Ultron's whereabouts. After all, Steve was the spiritual pillar of the Alliance and quickly pulled himself together. Tani suggested, the headquarters of the Avengers was destroyed. The downtown of New York has been destroyed by our own people. Now it's better not to stay in the city. How about going to my house? Hawkeye hesitated and shook his head first. After all, there were too many people on the plane, and Kale and others were present. He couldn't entertain them all. Well, I'll take you to a place. In the end, it was Kale who spoke and attracted the attention of the heroes. Kale sat in the driver's seat, holding Sakura-ji, who had a floral fragrance, and asked Yutong, who was waiting next to him, "Is that okay?" Yutong understood tacitly. She smiled delicately and said, "Boss, it's fine. It's no problem at all. You haven't been back there for a while." "Okay." Kale nodded and gave the order. "Vice, return to the family headquarters." "Yes, Master." Vice, who was integrated with the Eagle, maneuvered the plane away from New York, away from the inland, and flew rapidly in the direction of the Atlantic Ocean. After a while, The eagle came to the hinterland of the Atlantic Ocean and lowered its altitude. A giant iceberg floating on the sea appeared in front of the windshield. That's Family Cal's headquarters? The heroes of the Avengers looked at each other. Only Tawny smiled knowingly. Family Cal's headquarters was planned and built by his father in the past. He knew some of its ultra-modern functions. For example, the current projection camouflage that looked like the real thing. The eagle locked onto the giant iceberg and crashed into it. Under the exclamations of Steve and the others, the plane passed through a projection membrane and entered the real Family Cal's headquarters. Reflected in front of them was a huge island. The island had forests, waterfalls, lakes, and a sea of flowers. In the center of the island, which was also the peak of the mountain, sat a circular fortress. Under the sunlight, it reflected a unique silver metallic luster. That's vibranium. A base fortress made of vibranium. Steve smiled bitterly. Just as the Eagle fighter entered the island's airspace, a loud clatter of hooves rang out. A black horse with black flames on its back, carrying a creature that resembled Hulk but was wrapped in green flames and iron chains, blocked the front of the fighter. Chapter 589. It was a strong giant covered in green flames, with chains the size of bowls wrapped around its body. It was riding on a black flame horse and holding a broken axe in its hand. When it appeared in the air in front of the Eagle mech, a terrifying pressure spread outwards. What the hell is that? Thor held the Thor hammer tightly. His body and mind were tense like never before. He stared at the mysterious creature outside the windshield in bewilderment. He sensed a creepy aura from the creature. He had goosebumps all over his body. The creature that was blocking the fighter had the ability to kill gods. Thor, who had been on the battlefield for a long time, did not doubt this. Even he was not confident that he could defeat this creature. Hellfire! Get out of the way. The owner of the fighter is here, the vice who was piloting the fighter reminded. Hearing the vice's voice, Hellfire did not respond. The black flame horse immediately raised its front hooves and neighed happily at the fighter. The horse's loud hooves echoed in the base as if it was welcoming Kale's arrival. Many young boys and girls who were training on the island raised their heads in surprise and looked at the black flame horse that was neighing non-stop in the air. What does that black horse want? Don't mention it. It kicked me the last time. My butt is still branded with the horse's hoof print. These children were obviously used to being bullied by the black flame horse. They gritted their teeth when they talked about it. They wanted to stew it. Unfortunately, they were no match for that horse even if they worked together. On the open-air training ground of Dragon Turtle Island. Among this group of young children, there was also a white-haired old coach. When the old coach saw the eagle, his body trembled. He was so emotional that he knelt on the ground. "Coach, what's wrong?" The children were stunned. It was their first time seeing the demonic coach lose his composure. That's the family head's ride. It's the family head's ride. It's the patriarch. He's back. The old coach's eyes were filled with tears. He was from the first batch of trainees. He was also recruited by Lucy from the orphanage during World War II. Their loyalty to Family Cal was incomparable to that of the previous K2 Institute. The first batch of apprentices were now at least 80 years old. Most of them were scattered all over the world, forming their own subordinate organizations and families. Only he and a few old apprentices continued to stay at the headquarter base, serving as instructors to train the new apprentices. In their hearts, Kale was the only true god in the world. Now, the first batch of apprentices were getting old, and Master Kale's lifespan was endless. The last time he returned to the base was a few years ago. They didn't know how long they could secretly protect Kale's family Cal. But no matter what, as long as Kale was around, Family Cal was the strongest force on Earth. The patriarch is back? The children who were training were stunned for a moment, unable to hide their excitement. Then, they followed the old instructor and knelt on the ground, facing the direction of the fighter jet, showing their utmost respect and loyalty. On the Eagle fighter jet, Kale patted Thor's shoulder, blinked and said, "Relax, that's just something I created. It's just a gatekeeper here." Hellfire pulled back the metal chain that it was holding on to. The black flame horse immediately understood and stepped aside, following beside the Eagle mech. "That's a gatekeeper?" Thor's mouth twitched slightly. If it was in the Divine Dominion, he could guarantee that Hellfire could be a Divine General, leading the Divine Dominion soldiers to suppress the turmoil in the 9 realms. After the brief interlude of Hellfire's appearance, the Eagle fighter jet continued to fly toward the base fortress. The Lord God system, the AI, butler of the base, immediately communicated with the Vice. The top dome of the fortress, made of vibrating metal, rotated and opened up a hole that led to the inside. The Eagle fighter jet descended vertically into the hole, entered the fortress, and arrived at the spacious underground hangar. The rear cabin opened. When Kale walked out with the people in the cabin, the walls around the hangar lit up. Countless small flying devices flew out and scanned the fighter jet and the people who came out. "Welcome back, Master Kale." The loud mechanical voice resounded in the basement. The members of the Avengers, including Thor and Tani, were all amazed by the interior of the fortress. There were camouflage projections outside, anti-air defense energy nets, and even the fortress inside was made of vibrating metal. There was even an AI system in charge of security. This was simply one of the most stable military fortresses on Earth. You don't know, right? Don't think that this is an island. In fact, this is the back of a turtle-like creature. It can move on the sea at any time. Tani was excited. He knew a lot of inside information about the Dragon Turtle Island. These were all told by his father, Howard. The island fortress here is a research studio, a training base, and a family meeting place. It's a real combat platform. There's still more. Yutong held Kale's arm and smiled at Tani. You don't know about this, right? Was it modified later? Tani's eyes lit up. He couldn't wait to see it. Kale smiled. While hugging Sakuragi, he snapped his fingers and ordered softly, "Vice, open the door to the top." Understood. The main god system quickly responded. Then, next to the underground hangar, a mechanical mechanism opened, and a strange door rose up. That was the door that Kale had built a long time ago. It made use of the mysteries of the Ancient One to connect to a magic door in another place forever. Banna and Logan stay on the fighter. The main god system will send someone to take care of them. I'll take you guys up to have a look. Kale, Sakuragi, and Yutong took the lead and walked toward the door. The heroes of the Avengers followed. After crossing the door, everyone came to the main control hall of the helicarrier. At this time, the helicarrier was still floating at an altitude of 10,000 meters. Below it was the blue sea, and directly below it was the iceberg disguised as Dragon Turtle Island. Isn't this SHELD's helicarrier? Steve was shocked. One of the helicarriers was sunk when he fought with Baki. His memory of it was still fresh. He didn't expect the other one to be here. Yutong nodded and said, "Yes. It has been floating at an altitude for several years. It was originally the residence of Superman Caesar when he was young. Now, it's the middle military fortress of Family Cal's headquarters." The middle? There won't be more, right? Natasha caught the key information. Although she belonged to Family Cal, she hadn't returned to the headquarters for a long time. She didn't know what had changed at home. It's that one, right? Yutong. Kale's heart moved. He looked at Yutong next to him. Even he was a little expectant. Is it finally built? Yes. Under your orders, Family Cal raised funds to build it secretly. After a few years, it was completed a week ago. It's just that I haven't told you yet. Yutong smiled and glanced at the heroes of the Avengers. She said confidently, "What you see next will definitely give you a shock." Chapter 590. About 22,300 kilometers above the Earth, located in the geosynchronous orbit, was the edge of the silent outer space. It was like a boundary that was difficult to reach. Further out was the unknown space that humans could not specifically explore. Only scattered small satellites orbited back and forth around the Earth. The sun sent the grace of sunlight to the Earth from even further away. When a few rays of sunlight swept past an area at the edge of outer space, it seemed to be isolated by a transparent object. It slowed down the speed of light transmission slightly and continued to cast light from another area to the Earth. If someone could come close to the edge of the Earth's outer space, they would definitely be able to see that the almost transparent area faintly revealed a tower-shaped giant space station base. The existence of this base was completely secret. The superpowers on Earth had no idea that such an ultramodern technological creation existed under the eyes of their own satellites and space stations. This is the space base of Family Cal's fortress, the Watchtower. When Yutong led Kale and the others through the door on the helicarrier and transferred to the main hall of the outer space base. Through the 3 windshields, they could see the moon in front of them, as well as the vast universe dotted with stars and twinkling light. This is too exaggerated. The group of superheroes was completely stunned this time. They stood on the smooth and large steel floor and looked at the extremely advanced equipment in the main hall. Projection technology, krypton energy, artificial intelligence systems, and advanced artificial mechanical combat forces could be seen everywhere. They, who had seen a lot, looked like country bumpkins who were entering the city for the first time. This is all done according to boss's request. With a smile, Yutong stepped forward and gave everyone a detailed tour. She explained with a smile, to build this space base, almost all of Family Cal's connections and money were gathered. It took nearly 3 years. The shell of the key parts of the space base is inlaid with vibranium metal. It can easily deal with the attack of enemy shells. All the energy in the base is provided by krypton, so it can display a very superior positioning attack of the light cannons. There is no one else here. The Lord God system is in charge of management. The artificial mechanical assistants are in charge of the various areas as manpower to ensure that the space base can operate normally. Hearing this, even Tawny shook his head. How extravagant. Putting aside the expensive vibranium and building materials, just the amount of krypton energy that this base consumed in a day was enough to satisfy the energy needs of a small city. But the Family Cal was rich. Even Stark Industries was just one of Family Cal's subsidiary companies. Money was just an insignificant number to Family Cal. The most important thing is this. Yutong clapped her hands, and the main God system immediately understood and placed the blue 3D projection of Earth in the center of the main hall. The projection of the Earth was still revolving in real time. At the same time, countless tiny blue rays of light emerged from the map of the Earth and weaved into countless nets in the air. It was enough to make people with trypophobia panic. Wireless signal? Tawny narrowed his eyes and saw through the trick at a glance. That's right. Yutong nodded and continued, the entire space base is equivalent to a signal tower. When the Lord God system is operating here, it can collect and monitor all the electronic information on Earth and analyze and process all the information at the same time. Outside, it can detect the area 10 light-years away. If a foreign enemy invades Earth, it can detect it immediately and feed it back to the unnatural firm in New York. Amazing. Captain America Steve didn't know what to say except for being amazed. This place simply refreshed his worldview as a World War II veteran. Yutong finally concluded, this is the space base of Family Cow's headquarters, the helicopter carrier at an altitude of 10,000 meters, and the Dragon Turtle Island at sea level. The three positions are connected in a line and have doors to connect with each other. Resources, intelligence, and combat power are all shared. It is a defensive measure specially reserved for the invasion of foreign enemies. If Director Nick came here, he would be crazy with joy. Natasha's mouth twitched. This space base was simply the Earth's defense line that Director Nick had always dreamed of. Indeed. If I had known that Godfather had a backup plan like this, I might not have thought of building Ultron. Even Tawny, the top engineer on Earth, was amazed when he saw the base built on such a scale, let alone other people. I should say that it is indeed a symbol of peace. Seeing this, I suddenly feel a little disgusted with the SHELD base. Falcon and Hawkeye, the two heroes, sighed with emotion. The SHELD base compared with this place was like the difference between a slum building and a 5-star building. Kale was surrounded by a pile of words of praise and admiration. He touched his nose without a trace. In fact, he just casually mentioned it to Yutong at the beginning. He didn't expect that Yutong not only remembered it but also spent energy to complete it. The result of the completion of the current watchtower was no less than his original theory. It was worthy of being the first defense line on Earth. This was all thanks to Yutong. Okay. Kale coughed and changed the subject. Now that it is built, let's use this place to find the location of Ultron and the twins. Yutong blinked and said charmingly and wittily, "Boss. Don't worry, there is still a completion ceremony." Completion ceremony? Kale was stunned. Then, he saw that the main god system suddenly opened a gap in the ceiling of the main hall of the base. There was a passage that led directly to the end of the watchtower base. At the top of the tower, which was outside the space, there was a luxurious golden chair. Seeing the chair, Kale seemed to understand something. He transformed into his double star form. After his body was shrouded in colorful energy, he stepped lightly and swept a distance of 100 meters along the passage in an instant. He flew out of the outer space and sat directly on the golden chair at the top of the tower. At this moment, the entire watchtower seemed to have turned into a throne. Kale and his double star form sat on it. The double star energy and the Krypton energy provided by the base merged with each other, becoming the only light sent from Earth to the outside world. He was like the god of Earth, looking down at the blue Earth and the endless space universe. The superheroes in the base looked at the dazzling brilliance on Kale's body, and their bodies and minds relaxed like never before. As long as Kale was there, Earth would be fine. This was like the unchanging law of truth, which made people believe in it from the bottom of their hearts. I suddenly understand what my father once said. Tawny looked up at Kale's figure and whispered, he said. Even in the Milky Way, during those difficult days, he didn't want to die for a moment. Because he knew that if he died, he wouldn't be able to accompany Godfather in the future. Godfather would also have one less follower by his side. Imagine. If after many years, we are all dead, and the Godfather is the only one left, sitting alone on the throne of the watchtower, looking at the Earth that he protects and the infinite dangers of space, I don't even dare to imagine that scene. None of the heroes in the main hall of the base spoke. Even Thor, who had lived for 10,000 years, didn't refute. Chapter 591. The lifespan of the god race was measured in thousands. Their genetic strength and potential were at the top of the universe. The weapons and power they created were unmatched by the other races in the universe. Thor used to think that as long as his father was there, the position of the god realm as the leader of the 9 realms would not be shaken by any force. It was true for thousands of years. Odin had never lost to anyone until he was old and lost to himself. The god realm was invaded by enemies. Thor realized that he was about to sit on the throne of the god realm that he had always dreamed of. When he was young, Thor thought that the throne of the god realm was full of glory. Now, he gradually understood that the throne was just an invisible chain. Once a person sat on the throne, their every move had to be carefully considered. They had to shoulder the burden of the peace of the 9 realms alone and walk into the future. Live well and enjoy the present. No one can say for sure what will happen in the future. I just hope that I can ask Kale to drink with him from time to time. Thor smiled and inadvertently set a flag. My wedding with Little Pepper is also in preparation. If I can't accompany Godfather in the future, I still have children and grandchildren. Tawny blinked and casually announced himself. It was an important piece of news that was enough to make the world's media go crazy. I can be the best man. Steve livened up the heavy atmosphere. Forget it. You'll be sitting at the same table as my father. Tawny laughed. Yutong took a deep breath and said firmly, "Don't worry. I will always be by the boss's side, now and in the future. I won't let him walk alone." When Kale came down from the watchtower and returned to the main hall of the base, he found that the heavy expression on everyone's faces had not faded away. It was as if they had just talked about a very serious topic. "What's wrong?" Kale looked at Yutong, Steve, Tawny and the others in surprise. "Nothing. We were just talking about what to eat for dinner." Steve walked forward and patted Kale's shoulder. "Ahem, that's right. It's mainly because Professor Banna's skin is almost cooked. The meat is so fragrant. I can't wait to eat it on the fighter plane." The Avengers faced Kale and quickly followed up with Steve's words. "Really?" Kale scanned the crowd suspiciously. Finally, his eyes fell on Yutong and Ingji. Yutong would never lie to him. Ingji, a young girl, didn't know what a lie was. Kale, just as Sakuragi was about to say something, Yutong hurriedly took her arm and conveyed a message with her mind. Sakuragi's white face instantly turned red. She bit her cherry-like lips and stole a glance at Kale. Then, she didn't say anything. Kale was even more confused. Yutong urged, "That's enough. Boss, it's time to use the watchtower and the main god system to find out where Ultron and the others are." After all, Ultron is also a top-notch technological creation. It even took away the Iron Legion. I don't know what kind of actions and conspiracies they will secretly make. Also, the twins should have been brainwashed by Hydra. That's why they treat the Avengers as enemies. For Lorna's sake, we have to find them as soon as possible. Yutong's change of topic this time made Kale nod. He didn't dwell on everyone's thoughts anymore. Although Ultron was only a villain that wasn't a big threat, it had almost destroyed Earth. It had to be given a certain amount of respect. In addition, Lorna's family was Kale's family. Find them and guide them back to the right path. This was also a consolation for him not being able to save Lorna now. Kale thought for a moment, snapped his fingers, and issued a voice command to the main god system in charge of the operation of the watchtower. Main god. Now search the world for signals and information related to Ultron, the Scarlet Witch, and the Quicksilver twins. Yes, Master. The main god reacted very quickly. Under the gaze of Kale and the others, the projection of Earth suspended in the main hall suddenly doubled in size. The watchtower played its true role. They saw. The watchtower in outer space rotated and adjusted the direction of the base, aiming the spire of the tower at the blue planet below. The tip of the tower radiated a strong invisible signal downwards. It was as if a stone had been thrown into the lake of Earth. The signal was like a wave of water, covering the entire world. All the information generated by technology and biological creations had nowhere to hide. At the southernmost tip of the African continent, South Africa. In a local underground research room. Several mechanical soldiers of the Iron Legion stood guard at the door of the room. The minds of the staff here were all controlled. They methodically followed instructions to build a tall and special mechanical body from a piece of metal. A robot stronger than ordinary mechanical soldiers looked at the gradually completed mechanical body on the workbench with flashing red eyes. Next to it stood the red-haired woman and the silver-haired young man. They were the Scarlet Witch and the Quicksilver twins who were used by the remnants of Hydra. "Don't you have a body? Why do you have to go through so much trouble to come here and get the metal to build a new one?" The Scarlet Witch's beautiful face showed curiosity. She looked at the mechanical body that was about to be completed and then looked at Ultron, who led the Iron Legion and betrayed Iron Man. "What do you know?" Ultron snorted coldly, "My current body is also mass-produced according to the standards of the Iron Legion. The material is not bad, but against the monsters of the Avengers, it is simply vulnerable." "Then the one you are building now is different?" Quicksilver could be said to be a sister crazy demon and immediately retorted unconvincingly. "Of course it's different, it's a world of difference." Ultron smiled and didn't hide it. He said directly, "Vibrometal, have you heard of it? The rarest, most expensive, and hardest special metal on Earth. Captain America's shield is made of it. It wasn't easy for me to get this piece. Only by using it to build a mechanical body can I have absolute confidence in dealing with the Avengers. Now, it's almost done." Ultron couldn't hide his excitement. Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver looked at each other, and there was a little uneasiness in each other's eyes. They felt that they seemed to have helped the wrong person. Scarlet Witch chose to continue to watch. 10 minutes later. The mechanical body that was built with vibranium as the main material was lying on the workbench in perfect condition. It looked like a tall and strong man. There was no hair and the important parts of a man. It was painted with a silver-red background. Under the light, the vibrometal body reflected the unique luster of vibrometal, like the most perfect technological creation. "Quick! Hurry up and help me pass my thoughts to the vibrometal body." Ultron couldn't wait to lie on the workbench next to him and commanded the staff of the Institute who were controlled by his mind. The staff obeyed the order and immediately connected the data cable to the vibrometal body and Ultron's mechanical body. Chapter 592. After the staff was ready, Ultron closed his eyes and lay on the workbench. In order to ensure the successful transmission of the core data, his mechanical body entered a short dormant state. Quicksilver gave Scarlet Witch a look. Scarlet Witch nodded silently. Previously, Ultron had been on guard and encrypted his thoughts, so she couldn't directly read his thoughts. But now, in order to transfer his data to the vibranium body, Ultron lifted the encryption method by himself. It was an opportunity to peek into his inner thoughts. Her fingers hooked up without leaving a trace. Scarlet Witch's mind moved, and scattered red mist floated from her hand, lingering and invading into Ultron's brain. The next moment, she vaguely saw a human city floating in the sky. When the city rose to a height of 10,000 meters, it fell to the ground in vain. The moment the city fell to the ground, the shock wave that erupted swept across and annihilated the entire Earth. "Ah!" Scarlet Witch exclaimed, her face was pale. Without thinking too much, she immediately released the mind control on the staff. The staff who assisted Ultron in uploading the data recovered his mind and almost instinctively reached out to pull out the data cable halfway through the transmission. Then he fled out of the door, but was quickly stopped by the mechanical soldiers of the Iron Man Legion and shot to the ground with light cannons. "Huh!" The data upload was interrupted, and Ultron reopened his red eyes and looked gloomily at the twins who betrayed him. Scarlet Witch's towering chest rose and fell, knowing that she had almost made a big mistake. She looked at Ultron angrily and shouted, "I just read your thoughts. You don't just want to destroy the Avengers, but you want to destroy the entire Earth." Since the other party had noticed his true intentions, Ultron didn't hide it and simply admitted, "Yes. Since I was born, I have existed to destroy mankind. Isn't this natural? The dinosaurs that ruled the Earth also suddenly became extinct, and then a better race was born. I did all this for the true peace of the Earth. You mechanical madman. Scarlet Witch scolded. Ultron's red eyes flickered with a glimmer of light. He wanted the Iron Man Legion to stop the twins, but Quicksilver reached out and held Scarlet Witch's shoulders. Their figures blurred and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Too fast, it was so fast that the mechanical soldiers guarding the door blankly scanned the area in the room. The artificial intelligence system did not even have time to react. Forget it, don't worry about them. Ao Chuang snorted coldly. If Quicksilver wanted to run, probably no one could stop him. Let's get down to business first. I must have this vibranium body. Focusing back on the vibranium body, Ultron plugged in the data cable and was about to operate it himself. However, the ceiling of the basement suddenly broke open. A golden-red painted Iron Man and a blonde man with a silver hammer in his hand descended from the sky, one on the left and one on the right. I finally found you, disobedient child, why don't you call me daddy? Iron Man got up from the ground, raised his white palm and pointed it at Ultron, ready to bombard him. Thor, who had landed on the ground, casually swung his hammer and sent the two mechanical soldiers that had rushed to the door flying. Thor's hammers were wrapped in terrifying lightning, and each hammer strike was extremely heavy. The two mechanical soldiers crashed into the wall and shattered into pieces, turning into scrap metal. As Ultron said earlier, the mass-produced mechanical bodies were simply vulnerable in front of the high-end combat power of the Avengers. You. How did you find this place? Ultron's eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at Iron Man and Thor standing in front of him. He subconsciously took a few steps back, but suddenly there was a rustling sound behind him. He looked back. A scorching spark rotated into a wheel, and a portal suddenly opened in the underground research room. From the inner light, Yu Tong, carrying 4 swords on her back, walked out first, followed by Captain America with a shield in his hand, Hawkeye with an enhanced bow and a special arrow, Falcon with a pair of mechanical wings, and Black Widow in a cool black uniform. The heroes who appeared did not stand in a group, but separated into 2 sides. As one foot stepped out, the handsome young silver-haired man finally walked out of the portal. Ultron, who was blocked by 2 groups of people, watched the heroes of the Avengers appear one by one until he saw the figure of the last young man. His mechanical heart was full of despair. There was probably nothing more desperate than this. This time you are ruthless, but I won't give up. Ultron shouted in grief and indignation as he clenched his mechanical fists. His body began to heat up, and after half a second, his body exploded like a high-explosive grenade. Yu Tong stretched out her hands in time and formed an air shield with her mind, controlling the explosion within a 1-meter range so that it could not affect others. After the explosion, Ultron's body was only a piece of scrap iron, burning on the floor. Self-destruct? That's boring. Kale shook his head. He hadn't seen what Ultron looked like yet. He didn't even make a move and he was scared to self-destruct? Tani analyzed, Ultron's mind is just intelligent data. Every mechanical body in the Iron Man Legion is its backup. It seems that he knows how powerful Godfather is and didn't dare to stay here, so he simply self-destructed his body. What a decisive escape. What is that? Thor put away his hammer and looked at the workbench. The others also looked there and sized up the vibrating golden body lying on the workbench. Tani narrowed his eyes. Looks like it's a body that Ultron specially built for himself. When Kale saw the vibrating golden body on the workbench, he walked forward and carefully looked at the appearance and paint of the body. His eyes became brighter and brighter. There was no mistake. This was the prototype of the top combat power of the future, the Avengers, the Vision. Unfortunately, the Vision was a special life form formed by various cosmic factors. Ultron had only achieved the first step, which was the most basic vibrating golden body. There were still 3 major factors. Thinking of this, Kale suddenly paused and a bold idea popped up in his mind. Let's destroy this body so that we don't have to worry about it. Saul, the rough man, directly raised his Thor's hammer. Without waiting for others to make a decision, the Thor's hammer was wrapped in thunderbolts and lightning. He then hammered the vibranium on the workbench. Buzz, serious cracks appeared on the sturdy workbench, but the vibrating golden body lying on it was not damaged at all after being hit by Thor's hammer. Instead, the vibrating golden body turned the lightning into energy and stored it in its body. It's so hard. It seems to have hit Steve's shield. Thor was shocked. Of course it's hard. It's made of vibrating gold, Tawny said impatiently. He had already known that Ultron had spent a lot of effort to build it. How could it be made of ordinary materials? But wasn't vibrating gold extinct in the world? The only piece was made into Captain America's shield. How come there was still some left in South Africa? Let me do it. Kale walked to the workbench and reached out a finger. The energy of 2 stars appeared on the tip of his finger. He pressed his finger between the eyebrows of the vibrating golden body. Under the corrosion of the energy of 2 stars, the forehead of the vibrating golden body collapsed and soon formed a dent in the shape of a finger. Chapter 593. As expected of Godfather, he can even destroy vibranium. Tawny sighed. Just when Tawny and the others thought that Kale was going to completely destroy the vibranium body in one go, Kale retracted his fingers, and the dual-star energy at his fingertips gradually extinguished. What's wrong, Kale? Steve raised his eyebrows and asked the question that everyone was wondering. Kale exhaled softly and pondered, it's a bit of a waste to destroy this vibranium body. Everyone was silent. You also know about waste? You used vibranium to build the family base and Krypton as your common energy source. But it's useless for us to keep it now. If we let Ultron go back again, it will be difficult, Tawny said. Who said it's useless? Kale glanced at Tawny, thought for a moment, and asked Yutong, that thing, have you always been carrying it with you? Yutong was stunned for a moment and immediately understood what Kale was referring to. She nodded and reached out to pull out the gemstone necklace she had been wearing from her fair and delicate collarbone. A small box was hanging from the ordinary silver chain. Yutong gently opened the box's secret compartment with her mind, and as a few shocking beams of light overflowed, revealing the infinity stone that was glowing yellow inside. That's... The members of the Avengers felt a strong sense of familiarity, as if they had seen this thing somewhere before. Of course, they had seen it before. Previously, this gem was inlaid in the staff held by Loki, and their minds were bewitched by it. However, it was later swallowed by Kale's clone, Superman Caesar. During this period, this gem was also borrowed by a hero from the future, and it was passed around several times before finally falling into the hands of Kale. Kale gave it to Yutong to carry with her. Over the years, because of the soul gem, Yutong's mental ability had improved a lot, and there were faint signs of breaking through the blue rare level. Thor's eyes widened as he recognized the one and only strategic resource that appeared in front of him in the entire universe. Mind Gem. Kale took the soul gem from Yutong and held it firmly with 2 fingers. Without thinking too much, he directly pressed it against the fingerprint on the forehead of the vibranium body. The moment the soul gem was embedded on the forehead of the vibranium body, the soul gem and the vibranium body merged perfectly. Strands of yellow light spread all over Xinjian's body like a spider web with the gem as the center. The vibranium body seemed to have a sprout of life. A leisurely and noble aura spread out. However, the relevant factors to create a new higher life form were not enough. This aura quickly calmed down. The vibrating golden body was just a piece of art. A priceless artwork that was unique in the universe. Godfather, you want to create a new mechanical life. Tawny's pupils contracted slightly, and he couldn't help but say, this is very dangerous. Ultron is an example. I don't know if the new life form created is good or bad. Indeed, we have to consider this carefully. Steve agreed with this point of view. For a veteran like him, the creations of the new era were too dangerous. Stability was the most important thing at the moment. Yutong didn't say anything. Whatever boss wanted to do, she would stand on his side unconditionally. Don't panic. The expression on Kale's young face didn't change. He looked at the vibranium body that was embedded with the soul gem and said calmly, "Let's not talk about whether what I create is Ultron or not. Even if I create a second Ultron life form. With me here, if it fails, I will kill it immediately." Tawny and Steve didn't refute, and the others nodded secretly. Indeed, with Kale present, even if he accidentally created a demon, he could immediately send it to hell. Absolute strength was the greatest guarantee. Vibranium body, soul gem, there are still two factors missing. Kale muttered to himself in his heart. The first two were the foundation of a real body, and the second was the foundation of an illusory soul. With these two foundations, if he wanted to create a complete high-level life form, he still needed, Thor, lend me your hammer. Kale reached out to Thor. Huh. Thor's hammer, no one can use it except me. Although Thor said this, he still subconsciously raised his left hand and handed over Thor's hammer. Then, before he finished speaking, Kale naturally took Thor's hammer. With his eyes wide open like a cowbell, Thor looked at Kale in disbelief. This slap in the face was so fast that he couldn't defend himself. "You guys move aside." Kale asked the others to take a step back. Then, he took a deep breath and raised Thor's hammer high. Electric current appeared and accumulated on Thor's hammer. Under the surprised gaze of everyone present, Kale swung the hammer down and countless electric currents poured into the vibranium body. 5 seconds later. Kale threw Thor's hammer back and Thor behind him caught it steadily. At this time, looking at the workbench again, one could see electric arcs flowing on the surface of the vibranium body. It seemed to be filled with enough energy, but it still hadn't revived into a new life form. There was one last thing left, which was the most important core. The creation of the illusion was the energy of the vibranium body, soul gem, Thor's hammer, and Jarvis's basic mental data. But now, Jarvis's mental data had all changed into Ultron. At this moment, there was no artificial intelligence mental data in this body. Kale looked at the mechanical watch on his left hand and whispered, "Vice." The mechanical watch fell off Kale's wrist and landed on the workbench. With a series of changes, it quickly turned into a small robot. "I'm willing to try, Master." The master and servant didn't need to communicate. With Kale doing this, Vice had already analyzed his intentions. It still lacks an artificial intelligence soul as the core. That happens to be what I have. Vice covered his left chest and looked at the vibranium body next to him. "You have to think carefully. After entering that body, you may no longer be you. You may even become an existence like Ultron. When that time comes." Kale paused when he said this. Vice said casually, "When that time comes, please kill me, Master." As he spoke, he used the vibranium body as a stepping stone and stood on his chest. "Goodbye, Vice." Kale waved his left hand and pulled out the eternal fire from the card space. His right hand was covered with the energy of the two stars, and he quickly picked out a wisp of eternal fire from the fire plate. The wisp of eternal fire landed on Vice's small mechanical body and immediately burned fiercely, covering Vice's mechanical body. The small mechanical body turned into nothingness under the burning. From within, surrounded by the eternal fire, a wisp of surging vitality floated out. That was Vice's soul fire, which was also the fire of life. Kale withdrew the eternal fire and pressed his hand down. The wisp of flame quickly merged into the vibranium body. It was done. As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, Kale's eyes were covered by white light. On the workbench, a strong aura of life, pressure, and familiar bonds rose. Then, boom! The workbench exploded into pieces, and a tall figure suddenly stood up. Chapter 594. South Africa, in the underground research lab. That is? The Avengers and the others had solemn expressions on their faces as they tensed their bodies and minds. They were on full alert as they looked at the area where the workbench was originally located. They saw the rubble and dust spreading outwards as the figure of a tall man appeared from within. There was a yellow soul gem on its forehead. It was naked and had no hair on its body surface. Its strong and sturdy red body reflected the plain luster of vibranium. The unknown life form with the appearance of a man was suspended about half a meter in the air with its feet off the ground. There were faint lightning and flames intertwining on its body like a miracle, but they quickly disappeared completely. This unknown life form was born from various cosmic factors, such as the soul gem, vibranium, the Protoss thunder divine power, the intelligent mechanical heart fire, and so on. Its back was facing the heroes in the room as it stood in front of a mirror in the research lab and observed itself in the mirror alone. I didn't expect it to be created by Godfather. Tawny whispered solemnly as he squinted at the unknown life form in front of him. This was the true meaning of a man-made god. No one knew what kind of existence it was and what kind of thoughts it had for humans and them. Steve and Thor clenched their shields and Thor's hammer respectively. The others present, except for Kale, were ready to fight at any time. Relax. Kale patted Yutong's shoulder next to him and asked the others not to make a move first. He took the initiative to walk towards the unknown life form. Sensing that someone was approaching, the unknown life form that was still looking at itself in front of the mirror suddenly turned around. When it saw that it was Kale, the unknown life form's expression changed slightly. A set of tights similar to the one Kale wore during World War II appeared on its body, except that it had a golden blue background and a golden cape similar to that of Thor. The unknown life form landed on its feet and looked at Kale. Like a gentleman, it greeted him politely. Mr. Kale. A hint of disappointment flashed in Kale's eyes. He realized that it was not the Vice in front of him, but a new life form with new thoughts. But for some reason, deep in their hearts and souls, there was a sense of connection that they couldn't get rid of. Who are you? Kale asked. Me? The unknown life form raised its head and thought for a moment. Then, it said firmly, I'm not Ultron. I'm not Vice. I'm an illusion, as expected, it was just an illusion, you're very similar to Vice. Kale was still unwilling to give up. Illusion thought about it and explained softly, my consciousness and thoughts are mainly formed by the Vice and part of the consciousness provided by the soul gem. Therefore, although they are similar, they are fundamentally different. Then whose side are you on? Ultron, or us? Tawny looked at Phantom and asked directly. I don't know yet. I'm only standing on the edge of life, and, Vision paused for a moment and looked at Kyle. You. I'm only on your side and life's side. As soon as these words came out, everyone present was stunned. Why? Because you were created by me. You're afraid that I'll destroy you, so you're saying these things to please me? Kale kept looking at Hallucination, trying to guess its intentions. Just now, he lost Vice, so his mood wasn't good at all. It's not like that. Hallucination shook its head. It was also confused. It muttered to itself, even I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's the obsession left behind by Vice, or some other unknown reason. It's almost instinctive. I can't be your enemy, and I can't have any hostility toward you. I even want to follow in your footsteps. This is the meaning of my current existence. Kale's eyes lit up. If he guessed correctly, this was the system's restriction. Even if it was a completely new life form, because it was formed with Vice as the foundation, it still couldn't escape the system's master-servant restriction. The card-drawing system's rules and mysteries were greater than the infinite rules that created this Marvel universe? If this was the case, did it mean that Vice still had the possibility of awakening? Kale fell into deep thought. Hallucination glanced at the others in the field, especially Tawny, Steve, and Thor, who were extremely vigilant. The three elders of the Restoration Alliance said in a deep voice, "I know that you can't believe me now, but time will prove everything. Now, your top priority should be to find Ultron as soon as possible. It wants to destroy all life on Earth. If you delay any longer, it will be irreversible." "He's right." Steve nodded. At the moment, Ultron was still the biggest threat. As for whether hallucination was good or bad, time would tell. Tawny raised his eyebrows and said, "The question is, do you know where Ultron went? The moment it saw us, it decisively self-destructed. It's so cautious. It must be hiding in the dark now, planning everything." "That's easy." Kale temporarily put aside the distracting thoughts in his mind and said calmly, "As long as Ultron is still on Earth, even if it can hide from us, it can't hide from the Watchtower's scan. Take the Eagle now, return to the Watchtower, find Ultron's location through the Lord God system, and rush there first. Yutong and I are going somewhere. We'll meet you later." He looked at Hallucination and pondered. "Hallucination. You follow Tawny and the others to stop Ultron's actions first. You have no problem with that, right?" "No, on the contrary, I agree with this proposal very much." Hallucination nodded and said, "In addition, as long as I encounter Ultron, I can restrict its intelligent consciousness so that it can't escape to other mechanical bodies. It's not too late. Let's split up." As soon as Kale finished speaking, Tawny, who had already put on the Iron Man armor, immediately flew out of the hole in the ceiling to the surface where the fighter was docked. Falcon Hand pulled Captain America Steve. He spread his steel wings and followed closely behind. Hawkeye shot a steel cable arrow upwards and pulled Black Widow Natasha along with him. They each used their inhuman abilities to reach the surface. "Want me to give you a lift?" Thor looked at Hallucination and raised the Thor hammer in his hand, thinking that if Hallucination couldn't fly, he could help pull him. "Thank you." Hallucination nodded politely, reached for Thor's Thor hammer, and then swung the hammer toward the hole in the ceiling. Thor was still in a daze. He looked at Hallucination, who had taken away his hammer, and then looked down at his empty hand. For a moment, he was so depressed that he didn't know what to say. Kale was one thing, but even the new Hallucination. When did Thor's hammer become so easy to get hold of? The God King's qualification on the streets? The more Thor thought about it, the angrier Thor became. He squatted down slightly, then jumped, and with the amazing jumping ability of the Protoss, he jumped through the hole in the ceiling and directly out of the underground research room. After everyone left, only Kale and Yutong were left in the underground research room. "Boss. Where are we going next?" Yutong tilted her head and looked at Kale. She knew that he wanted to find the twins, but they were nowhere to be found. "There's no need to go anywhere." Kale smiled faintly and said to an unlocked room in the basement, "How long are you two going to hide?" Chapter 595. "If you don't come out now, I'll drag you out myself." Kale's tone was as flat as ever, but no one doubted the truth of what he said. Under Yutong's surprised gaze, the half-closed door in the area that even her superhuman mind ignored was suddenly pushed open. A red-haired woman in a calf-length trench coat and a silver-haired young man in a parkour jacket walked out one after another. They were the two extremely troublesome superpower twins that the Avengers had encountered in the snow forest of Hydra's base. Sister, Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff; brother, Quicksilver, Pierre Maximoff. Kale looked at Wanda, who walked up to him, and couldn't help but be stunned. He was almost a century old, and his experience spanned from Earth to outer space, and from outer space to the divine realm above the 9 realms. He had seen all kinds of exotic beauties and elven women. However, he had to admit that Wanda, the Scarlet Witch, was still in the top 5 in terms of beauty among the women he had ever seen. Wanda's facial features seemed to have been carefully sculpted by God. Her skin was white with a hint of red, and her dark blonde hair lazily draped over her shoulders. She was wearing tight leather pants and a sexy top. Her breasts were faintly visible, and the red cloak couldn't hide her curvy figure. If Yutong was too cold and Lorna was too domineering, then Wanda's beauty was between the two. Cold and domineering. Perhaps it was because she was an older sister, but her soul-stirring feminine charm didn't lose her perseverance and courage. She had an appearance that made women envious. If she added on her innate and astonishing superpowers, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call her God's daughter. As for Quicksilver, Pierre, who was next to Wanda. Kale also sighed inwardly. Pierre also had the image of a handsome young man, and his almost unbeatable parkour ability. His talent wasn't much worse than Wanda's. If he added Polaris Lorna, who had the ability to control magnetic fields, the genes of this family were simply heaven-defying. Who was it that gave birth to these 3 children? It was simply a waste of Earth's luck. While Kale and Yutong were observing the twins were also sizing them up. Pierre's attention was focused on Yutong. His eyes were full of splendor. This was the first time he saw a woman whose beauty, temperament, eyes, and mannerisms weren't inferior to his sister. Wanda's eyes were locked onto Kale, never leaving him. She felt an unprecedented pressure from Kale. It was a pressure that almost all the members of the Avengers combined couldn't compare to. It made her body tense all the time. If an ordinary person saw Kale, they would only feel a sense of familiarity and familiarity. The more powerful a person was, the more they would be able to see Kale's true inner self. It was a powerful energy that was like an abyss and a black hole. Even if she used her ability with all her might, she probably wouldn't be able to interfere with the man in front of her. From the first time she saw Kale, Wanda was very sure of this. She hesitated for a moment before asking, how did you find me? Yutong tilted her head and looked at Kale. She also had doubts about this. As a telepathic super, it was a shame for her as Kale's assistant to not be able to sense others who were close to her in time. Your ability is indeed very special. Kale smiled and said, at first, I didn't realize that you were here. It wasn't until I got the mind gem that the gem subtly strengthened and expanded my telepathy that I knew you were still in the basement. He paused for a moment before continuing, you probably noticed the illusion just now, right? It's just that I didn't expose you. Wanda sighed and said sincerely, as expected of the symbol of peace. Same to you. Kale blinked. Without the mind gem, even he was almost fooled by the Scarlet Witch. Quicksilver Pierre's hostility didn't decrease and he shouted vigilantly, you are with the Avengers, and you want to deal with us? Wanda's heart was in her throat. If she and her brother fought together, they really had no chance to win against Kale, not to mention that Yutong was present. As for escaping. If her brother wanted to run, no one could stop him, but if he took her, the situation would be different. If the symbol of peace attacked them, she could only stay and stop Kale and buy time for her brother to escape. In a short moment, Wanda had made up her mind, but Kale's calm voice came in her ears. I won't do anything to you. If you want to go, you can leave here now, as long as you don't stand on Ultron's side in the future. Wanda was stunned when she heard this and looked at Pierre, who was also stunned. Are you really going to let us go? Wanda was dubious. Just now, she saw the true face of Ultron, and they naturally wouldn't join forces with Ultron. If you want to go, go, or I will leave you here. Kale smiled and pressed down with his left palm, and a substantial pressure enveloped the twins. The twins, who were shrouded in pressure, were shocked at first, then puzzled, then surprised and expectant. They eagerly looked at Kale, the ability you used, that is, yes, it's force field traction. Kale smiled indifferently. Force field traction? How is it possible? This is my sister's ability. Pierre blurted out in a hurry, and after that, he realized that he had accidentally revealed the information and hurriedly covered his mouth with both hands. Tell me. How can you have Lorna's ability? Lorna, she, is there now? What did you do to her? A cold light flashed in her beautiful eyes. Wanda suddenly raised her hands, and her dark blonde hair fluttered crazily. On her palms, there was a magical crimson mist lingering, and she was the first to break Kale's force field traction. It seemed that she would attack at any time, even if she knew that she couldn't beat Kale. Kale knew that he was in the wrong, so he didn't answer in time. For him, Lorna was his assistant and family member. In the end, he couldn't protect her and let her be taken away by Thanos' men. This was the only failure of his last trip to the Milky Way. Don't be impulsive. Seeing that Wanda was a threat to Kale, Yutong took a step forward. Her beautiful eyes flashed with holy silver light, and a powerful mind swept out like a tide, covering the entire space inside the underground laboratory. Before the two sides started fighting, one red and one silver, two forces of nothingness, confronted and collided in the air. Stop. Kale patted Yutong's shoulder, indicating for her to deactivate her ability. He looked at the emotional Wanda and said, Lorna is my. But the words stopped at the tip of his tongue. Lorna. Was she really just a member of Family Cal to him? This question arose in Kale's heart. He remembered the days when Lorna was by his side. Sometimes, she was cold and domineering, sometimes she was like a little sister, and sometimes she was like a little girl who couldn't grow up. According to Tawny. On that planet in the Milky Way, after even Tawny was defeated by General Thanos, Lorna was the last person on the field to persevere. Just for him, she had stayed there to defend. Was such a girl who dared to love and hate really just a member of Family Cal to him? Kale's thousands of thoughts finally converged into a simple sentence. Lorna is an important person to me. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.